Silver City, Market Square. You can hear the calls of traders with shouts to buy a bleaching potion. Someone offers it to a passer-by, gentleman's cigar. Ladies and gentlemen, rich and poor of different classes scurry around the main square of the city. A cart is moving and shouts to give way can be heard. The cart is rushing fast. People part and whisper to each other. Someone is being transported. Apparently a new prisoner. Look how many guards are accompanying him. Pointed ears and golden pupils are visible in the cage of the cart, so it is a werewolf. Someone in the crowd suggests. Wanting the creature to die, it is clear it has killed a lot of people. Silver. The city is famous for its huge prison called the Prison of Rose, which is engraved with a magical spell that seals away magic, and Lord Aiden Garrett himself is the warden. There is no chance of escape, but not everyone wants to believe it. Then someone's hand breaks through the stone floor. And now, free, the Princess of Blood is pleased that she outwitted the overseer Aiden himself, who can't compete with her. The creature takes deep breaths. Here is the taste of freedom. A few more steps, and she will be free as a bird. The bloodsucker thought, wow, I dug for 2 years. They didn't even strengthen it with silver. It was painful, of course, but it was worth it. The vampire stood under the full moon. Bats flew by. Oh moon, oh air. Moment bliss. She was interrupted by a male voice calling her a complete fool and giving her a minute to return to her cell. A man in a tall top hat appeared from the darkness and noticed that Madame Vampire had 98 years of imprisonment, but apparently everything was moving towards adding more time. When she asked how he knew that she did, he replied that vampires don't need to go to the toilet, but she was stuck there twice a day. She was dejected by this revelation and asked why he didn't stop her right away. He said that he simply wanted to catch her off guard. Then Vampiriella stated that having caught her 2 years ago due to her mistake, she was looking for a way to freedom, and now only one of them will die. And then they put a gun barrel to her head from behind. A sweet little girl with pigtails named Vanessa who served time for murder with. She said with a calm air that Aiden had ordered her to be caught. The elder witch Daylin came out next and languidly noted that the escaped prisoner. I dug for a very long time. She almost crazy. I couldn't get over it because of boredom. Over it. With an evil growl, the hunted bloodsucker addressed them with the words that they were the most powerful witches on the continent. Accompanied by the death priests, the smiling necromancer Arsenia appeared with the question of whether the vampire's ashes could be kept for themselves. The vampire screamed why they were serving a man. The witches remained silent pretending not to hear the question, while the captured captive growled like a cornered animal. The man in the top hat answered for them, saying that there was a business agreement between them. He would improve their conditions in prison, and they would help in capturing the escapees. Then the vampire showed with all her appearance that, unlike her worthless comrades, she had pride, and therefore had no intention of returning to the cell. Then the man seriously said that they would stuff her mouth with garlic, tie her to a cross and take her out into the sun. The picture was not pleasant for the vampire, and seeing herself in this position, she became quiet. A second later, she coyly babbled, "Why is he doing this to her? She just came out to admire the moon." The warden ordered her to return through the same hole she had come out of, or he would pour holy water on her. The warden was Aiden Garrett, famous for the whole continent with his strength, accurate shooter and the swordsman. Just the mention of his name makes the evil spirits tremble. And then at one moment he died, and our hero was summoned from his world into his body without any of his skills or experience. The only experience he had was as a prison guard, but this prison was home to all the continent's most vicious women. Demons sucking out the soul to the last drop of blood and dreaming of doing the same to Aiden. Zombies killed without any pity or reason. Draconids, pushing a person to the most vicious desires and their taking away body. And here is another variety. A succubus, dreaming of getting a warden for love pleasures, who has seduced dozens of decent citizens. And other indescribable creatures were gathered in this prison for especially dangerous criminals. Aiden walked down the hallway, turning off the light for the night. Realizing that things were getting worse and worse, his name alone was no longer enough to hold him back. Prisoners. Passing by another chamber where a creature with many snake heads sat, hissed to the warden that his name no longer made the mountains shake, and then added that he was now a piece of shit, especially after her poison got into him 3 years ago. The creature dreamed of tearing Aiden into pieces and savoring each of them, and so did each of those sitting there dream of something similar. Man, I walked past with 2 security guards, hearing ridicule. From all sides one could hear how weak and pathetic he had become. The half-man, half-animal dug into the bars and growled that it would kill him at the first opportunity, since it had no strength left. Then Aiden used a trick to summon bright sunlight, and the half-man, half-animal screamed. It began to thrash and was indignant that prisoners also had rights. The man, meanwhile, was thinking that in 2 months, sleepless nights, I managed to learn only the most basic spells like this flash. He understood that any of the prisoners could tear him to pieces. He walked on and thought about not sending him any more prisoners like that. When he moved to another section, he saw chaos and guards lying on the floor. Anyone who wasn't on the floor was yelling at them not to move, a familiar scene for Aiden. At this time, a new prisoner was brought in. One of the guards noticed that this one was sentenced to death and was not particularly friendly. The tied-up werewolf girl was furious and cursed everyone around her. Taking on the case of a new prisoner, Aiden Garrett learned that the werewolf girl's name is Veronica and that she is a former mounted police officer. Silver City, during an investigation into the sale of counterfeit alcohol, shot and killed the owner of a bar. After scrolling through the history of the crime, at the end there was a death sentence. Prison doctor, he put the werewolf to sleep, and a seemingly ordinary girl was already lying in front of them. Aiden, the Rikazal, took the prisoner to the locker room and the girl was carried away. One of the escorting guards asked the warden to stay. Aiden said that a month had already passed since he applied for additional prison cells but still had not received an answer. If this continues, a riot is inevitable. The guard chuckled and asked how many years Aiden had been working there. Overseer, and I still don't understand how everything works. He continued to remind that the prison contains more than 1,000 prisoners. Maintenance is expensive, and in addition, most of the prisoners live for thousands of years. Our hero answered what all this has to do with him. The guard answered honestly that a group of prisoners had died under mysterious circumstances, but that this was generally a happy event. Because of this, a rally in support of the extermination of magical creatures was held in the center. There was a small group of supporters of other races. They stood timidly and tried to remind everyone that these creatures had once helped to reclaim the earth. The warden realized that he had to find a way to kill the prisoners to appease the public, something he did not agree with at all. The guard shrugged, noting that it was Lord Aiden who was to blame for what was happening. It was he who had placed so many prisoners in prison, and the people were rebelling, believing that while they were living in the cells, enjoying everything, they were leading a miserable existence. The warden replied that there were still people at the top who wanted to keep the prison, but for that needs to be killed a couple of prisoners to ease public unrest. As he was leaving, he suggested killing werewolf Veronica. Death row is already prepared for her anyway. Those who were considered different in the Silver City were those who was different from the human race. To fight a common enemy in the past, people collaborated with magical creatures for some time. As a reward for their participation in the war, they received equal rights with the citizens of the land. When the war ended, famine, poverty, and devastation covered the land. People needed an outlet. The nobles secretly blamed other races for everything, and so Aiden had to compromise. In this world, talking about moral and ethical standards is a foolish dream. He needs to choose a date and a prisoner to kill. Aiden and his assistant were thinking about where to put the werewolf Veronica. There were no more free cells, and most of them already had several prisoners. And then it dawned on the girl. What if she put a werewolf in with a succubus? The succubus kept her loving eyes on the warden, reminding him that there was plenty of room for both of them on her bed. Aiden asked her in surprise if she wasn't supposed to be free yesterday. The assistant noticed that she had returned to her old ways, inciting other succubi, which resulted in many men being hospitalized. Aiden screamed hysterically. Why does she always get into something? What does the succubus offended said that because of small mistakes she became a repeat offender and received another year of the term? Then she made a languid face and said that they could always come to an agreement. She was waiting for him in her cell in the evening and winked. Aiden's mouth dropped open in surprise, and he asked if she really agreed to everything. To which the succubus, cheerfully and with eyes shining with happiness, confidently said that she would do absolutely everything. A few minutes later, the still unconscious new girl Veronica was brought into her. The succubus, her eyes wide open, not expecting such a thing, screamed, "Who is this?" For what? Overseer, he replied that this was her new neighbor, and that if anything unexpected happened, she should immediately report it to security. Aiden asked the doctors to prepare more tranquilizers. They said that everything would be ready today. Lord Garrett, I noticed that they were no longer so young. They needed to have a good rest and spend time with their families. Everything could be done tomorrow. Today was a full moon day. The moon was shining very brightly and filling everything around with a silvery glow. Aiden worked tirelessly to prepare tranquilizers. The full moon is a very restless time. The werewolf Veronica watched the process, wondering if tranquilizers were really possible. Win werewolf on a full moon. At this time, the succubus had no less difficult thoughts. She began to suspect the overseer of non-traditional orientation, which she shared with neighbor. Aiden was preparing tranquilizers from Belladonna when Veronica suddenly declared firmly that she had been wrongly sentenced. At that moment, Veronica, who had turned herself, appeared in front of the cowering succubus girl and looked at the poor girl, wolfish with angry eyes. Card of one imprisoned vampire Ophelia, capable of drinking blood and turning into a bat. Skill level B, 200 ml. Human give blood on odd days, on even days 500 ml is bird blood. The next morning, Aiden's assistant read out the prisoner's petitions. The tiger girl was asking for a second comb. She needed different combs to care for her fur at different times of the year. Then Ekaterina from Cell 6 made a purchase request dagger. She needs it to protect herself from evil spirits. Aiden said to tell this Catherine that there is no need to think that the security guards are idiots. And finally, a request from the succubus from Cell 13 for early release. She will thank Aiden personally in her cell. Aiden asked to tell her that one more such request, and he will wring her neck with my own hand. At this time, the prison doctor ran out of breath, calling on everyone to move aside. He flew to Aiden and yelled that there was a full moon yesterday. He only remembered about it in the morning. For the new Veronica, what he gave was extremely little. The dose should be 10 times more. During the full moon, werewolves are especially bloodthirsty, and the succubus is in the same cell with her. Aiden dropped what he was doing, and they hurried to the cell. During this period of time, the prisoners were taken out for a walk in the fresh air. They watched as the succubus hung from behind Veronica and cooed something tenderly to her. The doctor breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that the succubus was okay. Aiden said he watched them at night. Everything was calm, nothing special. Werewolf. She behaved calmly, even made her bed in the morning. For such a bloodthirsty maniac, she behaves very intelligently. Veronica stood in this prison yard near the statue. The doctor looked at her carefully, and then said, "Is it really her?" Veronica looked at the stone statue of a man holding a child. Doctor said that the new werewolf is a bloodsucker. That's the reason for her obedience. Aiden was surprised what kind of subspecies this was, but the doctor replied that it was a type of werewolf that had a special relationship with people. 100 years ago, humans and werewolves were besieged by demons in a castle for several months, running out of food and supplies. Despite being allies due to hunger and exhaustion, humans and werewolves treated each other with suspicion. People were afraid that werewolves would eat them, and werewolves were afraid that people would attack and kill them. A civil war could start at any moment. And then a man named Lord Bayeux killed his horse and gave it to quality food to the werewolves, and also expressed his willingness to give up his dead child. This gesture greatly impressed the werewolf commander, and the conflict was resolved. And from that moment on, the group of these werewolves began to bear the title of bloodsuckers. Over time, they moved away from other werewolves and followed people, helping them in everything. They had to resort to sophisticated masochistic practices during the full moon to control their rage and live among people. And now hatred towards other races is flourishing like never before, and these werewolves are extremely rare these days, the assistant warden noted. Doctor protested against the execution of such a creature. They went to great lengths to live among people. There were cases when people beat them to death. Aiden thought about it, having heard about the nature of these creatures. At that moment, the escort flew in, shouting that the werewolf girl had gone crazy and had started massacre in the shower. Aiden charged revolver and noticed that she was apparently different from others like her. At this time, the guards were having a hard time holding back the prisoners, who were screaming that there was blood everywhere and that they had not signed up for this. Aiden entered the shower room. The succubus was lying unconscious. The new girl was tied up and seated in front of the warden. The cellmates were screaming for this crazy woman to be shot right now. Putting a gun to Veronica's head, Aiden asked her why she attacked her neighbors. Prisoner Catherine, who was serving time for stealing horses, shouted that he was a werewolf who was capable of anything when he went crazy. And then she added with a smile that a bloodsucker werewolf could easily snack on them. The neighbors demanded that either they shoot the werewolf in the forehead, or they themselves, they'll kill me. No one wants to risk their lives. Aiden stood there in confusion as the guards tried to calm him down, indignant prisoners. Aiden sternly told Veronica that they had strict rules here, and this should not go beyond the prison. He would postpone the execution date. She had something to add. Veronica calmly replied that she had been thinking about this for a long time. Thinks. The case is fabricated. Why wasn't she allowed to speak out earlier? She calmly looked at the barrel of the gun, noting that he had obviously been waiting for her death for a long time. Aiden looked into the werewolf's calm eyes, and calls to kill her were heard from all sides. He remembered the doctor's words that there were cases when such werewolves did not resist and were beaten to death. Aiden pressed his finger on the trigger of the pistol. At that moment, he imagined himself surrounded by bottles lying around in some barn. How can he live peacefully after killing an innocent person? He slowly looked away from Veronica's face, revolver, and pointed it upward. Aiden ordered the girl to be taken to the interrogation room because there was insufficient evidence. Catherine, a human prisoner, was caught stealing horses, has extraordinary riding abilities, and should not be allowed near horses. Veronica sat during interrogation and said that when she entered the shower, an argument broke out. 2 prisoners cornered a succubus and threatened her. The girl simply stood up for her, which the warden recorded and ordered the werewolf to be taken away. She shouted that he was not like that. that he should believe her, that she was not a murderer. Aiden said he had looked into the case and wanted to know where she was on the day of the murder. Veronica recalled that she had detained a counterfeit alcohol dealer. His wife committed the police station to appeal the decision, but Veronica didn't pay any attention. In the evening, she was found with a bullet in her head, to which Aiden asked if she hadn't shot, why they didn't find one bullet in the gun. When the victim was killed, Veronica went to a friend's grave in an old cemetery. It had been deserted for a long time, there wasn't even a guard, and she didn't give her weapon to anyone. Lord Garrett exhaled heavily and declared that she had no alibi. Suddenly, Veronica cried out passionately that this was her personality. She started with a small militia in a small town and rose to become a member of the mounted police. She was respected in the village. She saved many lives and caught many criminals. She caught the leader of a human sacrifice cult, thereby saving thousands of lives. And that's not enough. He walked up to the bars where the werewolf was locked and said that this did not prove that she did not kill. The number of people saved will not cover this murder and will not convince the judges, the warden added. The girl was completely depressed. She didn't think that by saving so many she wouldn't be able to save herself. Having ordered Veronica to be taken to her cell, Aiden sat lost in his thoughts, replaying the defendant's story in his head. At this time he was informed that the succubus had come to her senses and was being taken to him for interrogation. Megan brought her in, even though it wasn't her responsibility. Megan profited from the succubus's money as she was quite rich. The succubus immediately rushed to Veronica's defense, declaring that she not guilty. Then, with a proud look, she began to tell about the incident. She was a famous entrepreneur in the Silver City, and those newcomers, Catherine the horse thief and Anna the pirate, had ambushed her and blackmailed her. When she thought that the end had come for her, Veronica intervened and gave them a good hit describing in detail how she punched Catherine in the bridge of the nose and knocked her accomplice to the floor. When the warden asked how she ended up on the floor, the succubus sheepishly said that she simply stepped on a piece of soap on the floor and passed out in such an unfortunate way. She added that she believed Veronica was falsely accused of murder. Aiden conducted the interrogation in detail, reconstructing the picture of the incident from the succubus's words. The picture of a bar of soap on the floor and its awkward fall looked especially amusing. The succubus lowered her voice and said that her race could penetrate people's dreams while they were sleeping. And she did. Veronica's world was collapsing because no one believed her. She said that in a dream she saw that she had been set up. Aiden noticed how he could be sure that she wasn't interfering with his sleep. And then the succubus screamed that he was going to condemn an innocent man. The warden's heart began to pound wildly. He again saw a picture of a painful death, and the succubus added that her conscience was clear. She told the truth. He again saw the image of a painful death, and the succubus added that her conscience was clear. She told the truth. This image and the fear of torment due to a mistake drove him crazy. It wasn't easy to get Megan away resisting a succubus girl who screamed that Aiden was the man of her dreams, and that she paid a ton of money to go to jail to meet him. The warden was in despair. This whole picture was haunting him. What if it was a werewolf not guilty, and she is executed? How will he live with this? He and his assistant studied Veronica's file, which stated that the defendant lost control of her emotions and shot the victim in a rage. But usually, when werewolves attack, they very rarely use weapons, the assistant noted. She is still a mounted police rider. It was difficult for the girl to reach a verdict, but she was more inclined to be innocent. Aiden noticed that she came to this conclusion after reading a few lines. Lord Garrett added that the more he delved into the matter, the more questions he had. Then the assistant asked what it was about this new girl that they were spending so much time studying her case. As he left, he replied that killing an innocent person was worse than eating a tub of shit. The moon was shining brightly. The succubus was leafing through a magazine with very masochistic pictures. By making rumbling sounds, she prevented others from falling asleep, and she tried to shut up when they screamed. Irritated, she screamed that she needed it for her health. She was still young, and they millennials old ladies. At some point, she felt someone's finger pressing against her back. Turning around and seeing the face of the overseer, the succubus did not understand whether she was sleeping or this was reality. Mad passion embraced her, and she rushed at the man. The warden had to knock the agitated poor fellow down and shut his mouth. He pressed his lips to the succubus's and said that she wanted to help Veronica. That's why he was here. Veronica was sleeping, and it was the perfect time to get into her subconscious. The warden remarked that it wasn't often that she offered help, to which she replied, offended, that she knew how to be grateful since Veronica had saved her. Suku took the sleeping Veronica by the hand and asked the Lord if he was ready to enter the girl's dream. He nodded in readiness, ordering that nothing of his own be added. He felt her finger at his temple, and reality began to blur, and the succubus's words that she was not able to change anything, only show. And now he sees many dead werewolves, blood and the words of the killer that the rumors are true. These werewolves, they don't fight back. Veronica screams in tears that they shouldn't die like this. They didn't harm people. They leave and say that they keep their promises, that is their nature. She remains alone. The girl screams for help, trying to find at least someone, but there is no one. A wooden puppet man dressed as a judge appears, takes her by the hands and clarifies that it is true that a hunt has begun for her subspecies. They will find the killer. She doesn't have time to thank him before turns out in shackles, and he, terrible and tall, towers over her with burning eyes, accusing her of murdering a man. She tries to justify herself by saying she didn't kill, but the terrible voices of the puppets are heard from everywhere calling her a murderer. Next, the judge's gavel is seen striking and the death sentence is pronounced. Veronica covers her ears and screams why no one believes her. She didn't kill. And here he is, the succubus again returned into reality. Veronica began to toss and turn and could wake up at any moment. The succubus asked why Garrett couldn't just vouch for the prisoner, to which he replied that she didn't understand everything. The judge would insist on execution because the dead cannot speak. But then he remembered Arsena the necromancer. That's exactly who could help. And then they heard voices, those who greeted the senator's arrival at Rosa Prison. Aiden walked into the office where Senator Anthony was waiting for him. He didn't turn around when he heard the warden was in the room. Aiden was the first to address him, noting that coming to Rose in the middle of the night was not the best idea, as it could lead to the wrong assumptions. The senator, without looking at Garrett, said that he should think about himself and not eat up others in their problems. In response to the silent question, Senator Anthony continued to scold the warden. Rumors had reached him that Aiden was strenuously investigates the case of a criminal sentenced to death, instead of killing a prisoner so that the prison would not cease to exist. Aiden remarked that the senator had an excellent informant, to which he replied that he owned the local newspaper. He threw the newspaper on the table. Which, on the front page, there was an article about a bloodthirsty werewolf and the unfortunate victim who was torn to pieces. He continued, "What if the next issue featured an article about Aiden as a Silver City legend who dispensed justice?" They both featured a front-page photo of the warden as a heroic savior. The senator tried to convey to the warden that he was trying his best to present it, and Garrett did not understand what he was doing. By killing one maniac, Lord Aiden will become a hero of the city. He will be admired, loved, and they will be able to save the prison. He then asked Aiden why he was conducting an investigation if there was a court decision, to which our hero replied that there were a lot of inconsistencies in the case. At this statement, the senator lost his temper and shouted, "Does he understand that this is tantamount to a slap in the face of justice? The court, the members of the committee will feel hostility towards both the overseer and Rosa." He looked into Aiden's eyes and asked him to think better of it. Now was not the time for willfulness. Let him investigate further what he wanted. But now he needed to climb pedestal, so as not to lose what you have. He agreed that there were many unfair sentences in the Silver City, but now one had to be patient. Outside the window it was pouring rain and thunder rumbled. Lightning flashed. Lord Aiden Garrett sat in his office and thought about what he should do, how to proceed. He stood up and walked across the dark room. Opened secrete a cabinet with documents behind which there was a safe. By pressing the right combination, the opening in the wall opened. The door to a secret underground passage opened. It was very dark. The guard pointed a lantern ahead of him. It seemed like the stairs would never end. Suddenly he heard a loud voice coming from the depths of the dungeon. That he was hatching a very dangerous plan. The man asked how she knew about it, to which he received the answer that when people make difficult decisions, they need the support of loved ones and friends. In this world, she knows him better than anyone. In the dungeon sat a huge girl with wings behind her back and burning eyes, chained in shackles. She pulled with all her might. The shackles jingled loudly. She smiled and said that here he was again. Come to her. Our hero didn't hesitate for long and said that he was investigating the case. Prisoner. She looked at him with her wise and piercing eyes and added, "But he doesn't know what the consequences might be." He was once again amazed at how she did everything knows, as she appeared in front of him huge board and checkers with symbols. In front of him sat Meliferia, the goddess of conspiracies, who offered to play. If he won, he would receive an answer to his question. Aiden agreed and began his move, moving the huge checker. His checker was hit by the goddess figure. She noticed that Aiden was absent-minded and not focused on the game. Continuing the game, the warden shared his opinion with Meliferia that someone from the top was behind the werewolf case. The case was fabricated, and the police quickly passed the sentence. Aiden looked at his turn and continued to talk about how he was under pressure to kill the werewolf, or the prison would be closed. The goddess asked him if the Lord had ever thought about why a prison for dangerous criminals was built in such a large city. With all these magic circles, symbols, and silver, a whole chain of symbols and signs began to glow around Meliferia. She continued, "What is there to be afraid of at the top? Closing the prison is a move to collect more electoral votes, but until she gets here, the prison won't be closed." Aiden looked at her. She reminded him that he should take good care of her. If she escaped, the need for this prison would disappear. Aiden said that he had already killed an innocent person in the past and did not want to repeat it. The goddess smiled and told him that he was weak in spirit. He had no comrades. How was he going to fight? Aiden told her that he wanted to use the power of the 3 prisoners he had a contract with. Recalling the cheerful trio, he explained that he wanted to act through their hands in order to hide his identity. The goddess noted that pretending was one thing, but here the question arose of coercing the prisoners, whether it would cause a riot, and whether he would be able to cope with it. Aiden reasoned that he received requests from prisoners every day. He knew their desires and would be able to suppress their discontent. With a smile, Melifaria reminded that there wasn't much time left. The warden thought out loud that it would be possible to use other prisoners with superpowers. And then it dawned on the man that he could see who had what abilities from the prisoners' files. And he decided for himself that he would bribe them with gifts in exchange for their abilities. There are thousands of prisoners in the Rose Prison. With their strength, you can achieve your goal. Lord Garrett seemed to have found a clarification. A puzzle started fold. So he had dozens of possibilities and options for solving the problem. At that moment, the goddess's face leaned towards him, and she ingratiatingly asked if he knew what he needed to do to lose to her. Aiden looked at her tensely, a trickle of cold sweat dripping down his face. Seeing his fear, she laughed, saying that a man could not defeat her in mind games. But next time she wanted to play airplane chess, and this time she would let him go. He left and heard her voice after him, saying that it took her a lot of effort to call his dissolute soul into this world, so he should not let her down. The warden entered the cell of Arsena the necromancer. Rumors of a visit to the succubus's cell were already circulating around the prison. He interrupted her and started asking about the dead. She looked at him in surprise, asking since when overseer interested in corpses. Arsena herself was originally a living dead person, sentenced to life imprisonment for raising the dead, causing the plague and others' pranks. And now, listening to Aiden's request, she put on a businesslike air and declared that she was being exploited. She gave him the magic pendant and suggested that he do everything himself. Just stand next to the corpse and activate it. To his horror that she had such an object in her cell, the necromancer reassured him, assuring him that this pendant would not get her out of prison. She wears it as an accessory. She is a girl. It is part of her image. Arsena showed Aiden how to activate the pendant. Appeared before them something screaming and glowing, so that the warden was thrown aside. For a couple of minutes he couldn't move. Arsena cooed sweetly that she had simply shown him how to summon the dead. He stood with his back to her, and the girl thought that he was apparently unable to come to his senses from anger. The thought flashed through her head that people were nervous by nature, and it was certainly not worth angering a person like him. She had already seen pictures of hellish flames in the abyss of fire, so she was seriously scared. He still stood with his back to her. Arsena tried to justify herself by saying that she had told him not to come here. Suddenly he turned to her with a beaming smile and said, "Since she loved books so much, how would she like it if he brought her a couple of the new bestsellers here?" After this, Arsena was seriously scared. She thought that the boss had gone crazy after what he had seen. He left, and she wondered when he became so nice. That night, Aiden was already at the cemetery and digging one of the graves. Having dug up the grave and opened the coffin, he saw that the deceased had no body, only an urn with ashes. He wondered if it was possible to summon a dead person in such a case. He took out the pendant and activated it as Arsena had taught him. Nothing happened. Then he started trying again. The pendant glowed, but no one appeared. Behind him stood the cemetery guard with a lantern, wondering who was there at such an hour. Suddenly he saw glowing bodies in front of him, and his eyes wide open and screaming, he ran. Aiden turned around and wondered what had happened. When the souls of the departed glow began to rise in the graves, Aiden asked for forgiveness for disturbing them. There were many of them, illuminating more and more everything around the soul were staying. He thought he had underestimated the pendant. It didn't work with the ashes. Well, we need to look for another way. Then a dead woman with glowing eyes crawled up to his feet, growling, asking who had disturbed her peace. The man said that her killer was still at large. Let her tell who killed her, and he would take revenge. Dead woman hissed that she had little time. She tried to name the name. Then there was a flash of emerald light, so blinding that the warden closed his eyes. He saw a picture of her being thrown to the ground, and a male voice asking if she wanted everyone to know that her husband had been caught selling counterfeit goods. The woman screamed for him to let her go. She paid him. And after that, he shoots the woman. She dies. She disappeared and asked for revenge, but Aiden shouted for her to name the killer. He was overcome with impotent anger that, now do, how to understand who it is. Although if you think about it, you can find some clues in this. You just need to think carefully. Our hero began to recall fragments of what he saw. The shooter's outfit was typical of a mounted police officer. He must have missed work after the murder to fabricate evidence against Veronica. A mounted police officer has access to weapons and could well have pulled out the cartridge. The next morning, Aiden came to meet Keeper Arsenal. The keeper, whose name was Bruce, opened the door to his office. and Aiden noticed his uncertainty and thinness. Bruce was very surprised that he could see Lord Aiden himself with his own eyes. Pretending to be casual, Aiden said he had a problem with his revolver, so he thought he'd stop by while passing the police station. The guy asked with a smile what was wrong with the Lord's weapon. Still smiling radiantly, the warden said that the drum was not turning. Suddenly the guy started shaking, broke out in a sweat, and said that he needed a few days to do this, as he was very busy with work. Aiden agreed, thinking to himself that this was clearly not a killer. He remembered the build of the killer from the vision, and looking at this frail boy he realized that it was not him. "Garrett, when I went out, I thought that I couldn't scare him away in order to go after a bigger fish." Bruce stood there lost in thought when his friend called out to him, remembering how much fun they had with the girls yesterday. But he wasn't in the mood for conversation. Aiden was constantly on Bruce's mind. Maybe it was a coincidence and his weapon really did break. And then he heard a group of men gather and discuss something animatedly. The cemetery caretaker said that a man stood in front of the innkeeper's grave, and all the ghosts bowed before him. Bruce pricked up his ears and listened as the guard described what he had seen, and how he had run headlong, how terrifying the scene was. He was like a ghost himself listening to new details about the deceased thirst revenge. Her voice sounded clear, not to be confused with anyone else. The poor keeper curled up in the blanket in fear and was afraid to move. Aiden decided to use the magical crystal ball to summon the crows to watch over Bruce. The warden found it very suspicious that he was hiding. Using the ball, he summoned Dolly, one of the most powerful witches. She sat as if in rows, and seeing the warden, she asked with a smile how she could be of help. He reminded her of the benefits of cooperating with him. After she subdued and took away wild animals from zoos, Lord Aiden subdued her. She remembered that she was here by his grace. She laughed, turning it all into a joke. She was a prisoner after all. She was just joking. Aiden in return promised help, in terms of what he can do, but so that she doesn't take it for granted. He noticed that many prisoners have trouble acclimatizing to prison, can't get used to the food here, and he was going to buy some desserts. When the warden started talking about what he was going to buy, honey, the cake from the bakery on 7th Street made the witch's mouth water. She could already imagine that cake in her mouth. Then she laughed and said that everyone would definitely like the cake. Lord Garrett was nervous. It was already late, but there was no progress. He took the magic ball to see how Bruce was doing. He was sleeping soundly. Suddenly there was a roar and he jumped up screaming furiously. Bruce frantically wondered where the sound was coming from. Maybe the glass was broken. But no, there's a roof above. Suddenly, black tentacles began crawling towards him from above, and he screamed like a victim, telling them not to come near him. He tried to convince himself that this was just a bad dream, while at that time the tentacles enveloped him from all sides. And then the face of a dead man appeared before him, which spoke Bruce, that she is mortally offended. The keeper ran out into the street wearing only his underwear, screaming that he was being haunted by a ghost. Aiden looked at this picture through the ball as the guy yelled that they should ask the culprit. The warden stood in the cell with a burning torch, and in front of him stood the deceased who had completed the task. It was the dead siren that Aiden found. Her powers were stored in a voodoo doll. She had the ability to penetrate the world of the dead. Aiden promised to keep the doll, but he would also keep an eye on her so that she wouldn't throw anything away. Siren asked the Lord if he was afraid that he would be laughed at for using prisoners for such things. Aiden chuckled, notice him for trying to administer justice. He reminded her how she herself turned into a dead person to avenge her son. So now she is helping a woman just like her. At this time, Bruce ran down another street screaming that the ghost would catch him. People looked at him like he was crazy. He ran to one of the houses, knocked, and said that the ghost of the murdered woman from the tavern was chasing him. A man in a robe dragged him inside, asking why he was yelling like that so the whole city would know. Seeing a familiar face, Bruce was glad to be under Jalon's protection. He ordered to follow him. While they were walking along a dark street, Bruce told in detail about the pursuit of the dead woman, even how she touched his face. Bruce's nerves gave out again, and he yelled again that some big shot had come after them. His familiar ordered him to shut his mouth, saying that this was nothing more than the practice of local necromancers. Jalon grabbed the guy, noticing that Veronica was involved, and if she got out of prison, things would be bad for all of them. The guy screamed that he couldn't stand another encounter with the ghost. Jalon irritated. He said that associating with people like Bruce was a real punishment. He took him to his house and showed him the magic system. Protection from necromancers and any evil spirits. Bruce appreciated the professional approach and asked if Jalon expected the dead innkeeper to return for revenge. He looked at the guy and said that he had many enemies, including her. If Bruce wanted to stay with him, he should understand that the road to power was paved with corpses. At this time, Aiden was asking Veronica about Jalon, whether she knew him and what kind of relationship they had. Veronica remembered how she was preparing her horse to go on patrol. Jalon approached her and asked if she had thought about his offer. He offered her to spend a couple of nights with him in exchange for increase. Her answer that she was not interested in him provoked Jalon's anger. He raised his hand to hit her, but Veronica intercepted hit. He insulted her by calling her a dirty and shameless creature. After this, Veronica found herself sentenced to death in this prison. Aiden wasn't surprised. Rich people like Jalona. If they don't get what they want, they just trample on them, and he asked to tell him more about this person. Approaching one of the prisoners, he asked her how she was doing. He showed a stack of letters, saying that they sent they weren't, and it's not surprising, because whoever reads them ends up badly. He reminded her that she had unique abilities, unattainable for others. Aiden offered her a deal. She helps him get one coward out of the house, proving that she can be trusted. The creature that the fisherman caught did not belong to any race. When she wrote letters to them, they all fell into madness. A bird with a letter flew into the room where Bruce was sleeping, breaking the window. The guy sat up, thinking about what had just happened. Having opened the letter, his face began to change. It was not entirely clear what was written, but horror and panic began to grip him. My head started to spin. I saw images of fire and chaos, and the room started to swim before my eyes. Bruce walked over to the window where the bird had made a hole and looked out into the street. Jalon, hearing his screams, went up to him to find out what had happened. Bruce, again in his underwear, rushed past Jalon, who was calling him with wild screams. Bruce, his face twisted in horror, screamed that the world was ending. Already chaos has arrived. Jalon called the butler and ordered him to catch this crazy. Bruce saw in real a picture in which he was surrounded on all sides by huge tentacles. There was no one else in this world except him. He felt like he was in a nightmarish vacuum. And then he sees before him the enraged ghost of the tavern owner who has come to kill him. He screamed at her to leave him alone and not to touch him. Bruce lay in the courtyard of Jalon's house, seeing the butler, who was trying to calm him down, the late innkeeper. In the end, he yelled at her not to touch him. It was Jalon who shot. Jalon angrily took the gun, intending to finish off this idiot, and Bruce fell at the feet of the ghost, whom saw and begged for forgiveness. The keeper sobbed and muttered that the one who is guilty should pay. At that moment, a bullet touched him. It hit his glasses and earlobe, and the guy began to have another attack of madness. At first he thought he saw a crow attacking him, but then the real picture emerged and he realized that it was Jalon who had shot. He stood on his knees, not knowing what to do. The frightened butler ran away. Jalon again aimed at Bruce's face, saying that he had called for his own death. Before he could shoot, a flock of crows flew at Jalon and they knocked him down. "Off your feet," which allowed Bruce to get back on his feet. He ran as fast as he could without looking back, screaming and begging for salvation. Then he slipped and fell into a hole that looked suspiciously like a grave. Lying down, he saw a plaque with a tombstone. It was Veronica's grave. And then dark shadows approached Bruce from all sides. He screamed so that they would not come closer to him. These were ghost shadows that rose from the graves and tried to surround the guy. And now he's running down the city street, destroying everything in his path, people shouting after him, calling him an idiot. In his clouded consciousness, he saw not a city square, but a cemetery and ghosts chasing him. And so he came to this next one glowing tombstone and saw his date of birth, name, and signature that a notorious scumbag rests here. He's in horror, he gasped, realizing that this was his grave. Jalon appeared before his eyes, telling him that if he wanted to stay with him, he had to remember that the road to power was paved with corpses. Bruce realized that it was the souls of the people Jalon had killed that were haunting him. Looking at them, Bruce asked either them, or himself, could the same fate await him. The ghosts began to disappear, dissolving into the greenish fog. And now Bruce sees around him a city square, where he stands half naked, and people passing by him. He heard the townspeople calling him a sick psycho who talks to himself. And so he sits in Aiden's office, repentant, and testifies with tears in his eyes. He is ready to testify in the case of an innocent person sitting in this prison. He confessed to Aiden that he had changed the bullets in Veronica's gun, for which Jalon gave him money. He tearfully asked only for protection. Aiden decided that it would be safer for him to remain in prison. Jalon was looking for Bruce on horseback and ordered his butler to find him wherever he was. A servant ran towards him, shouting that Lord Aiden knew about the crime that had been committed. Overseer followed the suspect through the witch's magic ball and decided it was time to capture Jalon. Having saddled his horse, Aiden set off to catch the criminal, ordering that all meetings be cancelled until he arrived. A small rat jumped off the back of a running horse and went into the cell. She ran to the one she served. Arsena the necromancer looked at the little stranger in surprise. A hand appeared from the cell and the rat jumped onto the hand. The voice said that Dolly was very brave. She had saved the warden many times, but at this critical moment she had escaped. It was the witch Dolly who lost faith in Mythicat Lord Garrett. She saw how the dead frightened him in the cemetery, and the fact that he turns to the prisoners for help. Arsena responded to the witch's thoughts by saying that she didn't care what the warden was really like as long as it didn't affect her comfort in this prison, and she buried herself in her book again. Dali noted that she does not plan to stay in this prison. Remainder life, if Aiden really is not real, then there is nothing to worry about at all. She saw that Aiden was in a trap, so let's see how he gets out of this situation, she thought. Someone stood in a tree and watched the jumping warden, saying that it was just time to test what she was capable of. Veronica, sensing something was wrong, began to scream to be released. The warden was in danger. Dolly waved her hand indifferently and told her to stop yelling. The guards approached the cell. Veronica was shaking, and she insisted that the smell of the person pursuing Aiden seemed to him acquaintances. The succubus reminded her that werewolves have an excellent sense of smell, and that she needed to be released to save Lord Aiden. The werewolf desperately asked them to let her out, but they only looked at her silently. They decided that the prisoner was simply taking them for idiots and wanted to play a prank on them in order to escape. At that moment, Aiden Friend's assistant appeared and ordered Veronica to be released into her custody. Besides, all the facts about her innocence were in hand, and she would be released soon anyway. The guards looked at Frenda in surprise, but after a couple of seconds they turned to the camera where Veronica was sitting and began to open the lock. The witch muttered resentfully that she would complain about such injustice. Werewolves weren't the only ones with a good sense of smell. The funny little elf screamed that she was curious to know what was going on. Let them tell her. The succubus declared triumphantly, as she was Lord Aiden's official girlfriend, and was personally briefed on the matter. Jared was running away from the warden when something started attacking him. He waved his hand away, shouting for it to get away from him. Aiden knocked him down while he was moving, causing him to fall off his horse. Another minute later, Jalan was lying on the ground, and the warden was accusing him of committing a crime. At that moment, the warden's horse reared and he grabbed the reins to keep from falling off. Sharp saber slashed. As the animal's belly was cut open, Aiden felt himself losing his balance. The dead horse lay on the ground. Jared and the stranger stood side by side. The stranger told Jared to run. He would teach the warden a lesson himself. As Jared ran away, he turned to Lord Garrett and introduced himself as a bounty hunter. Hunter White was hired by Jared. He took on the most difficult assignments. That's why there was "I'm very glad" break-off life to the warden. He stated that if he killed the legendary warden Aiden, he would become rich. The next second he rushed at Aiden with lightning speed. He was truly a professional in his field, not giving the warden any leeway. Another minute and Lord Aiden would have been dead, but suddenly they heard some noise. Veronica, who was beginning to transform, rushed at the hunter from above. She broke through this magical protection that White had surrounded himself with to make himself invulnerable. Aiden was shocked to see her here. How could she get out of prison? But the girl shouted at him to catch up with the criminal. She would take it upon herself. He wanted to help her, but he understood that by that time Jared would have managed to run far away. His gaze fell upon the sharp saber of the bounty hunter, which easily cut his horse in half. Telling Veronica to be careful, he rushed to catch up with Jared. White was pissed off by this girl who thought she could beat a pro like him. He rushed at Veronica with a saber, who was able to dodge in a matter of seconds. Seeing clouds of smoke in front of her, she couldn't figure out where White was. He jumped up, toe cut. She remembered how many years ago she trained her skills on werewolves, and then one girl ran away. The girl was gasping for breath. Her eyes were watering as she made her way through the smoky haze. She saw a figure that looked like White and rushed at it. Veronica, gathering all her reserves of strength, struck the standing figure, but it turned out to be Cloak Hunter on a tree branch. He jumped out with a grind, deciding at that moment to finish off Veronica. Having thrown the magic vessel, he laughed and said that she was finished. She would not be able to dodge anymore. A vessel with a magic potion revived a tree that had turned into a monster. Its roots were emerging from the ground, and one had already wrapped around Veronica's leg. At this time, Hunter, sitting on a tree behind the head, he pulled a crossbow and shot at the girl. She ran screaming, the arrows piercing and tearing her skin until it bled. At that moment, her eyes lit up with a yellow fire and she began a dress. Since in the werewolf's body, she was much stronger. Jared was in the city. He made his way past other people, looking around to make sure no one was following him, when suddenly he saw Aiden running towards him, swearing that even a bounty hunter couldn't stop him. Furious, the criminal decided to hide between the narrow streets to get lost in the crowd. But at that moment, a cart with logs drove away and crashed into him, breaking his nose until it bled and he fell to the ground. Opening his eyes, he saw Aiden standing there, who reported that now Jared was not only a participant in the murder, but also the organizer of the attempt on his life, and there was no justification for this. People started paying attention to them. Aiden leaning with one hand on his cane, with the other holding the revolver. He pointed it at Jared, who was twisted with rage and was rummaging through the inside pocket of his coat, taking out the weapon. Aiden fired a shot, but nothing happened, not a single bullet, but he was loading the gun. The criminal chuckled, wondering how the warden would kill him now while taking out his weapon. Our hero used a light spell and Jared closed his eyes from the sudden flash. Lord Garrett broadsword to his throat. Criminal, he croaked that he had nothing to do with the murder, so why drag him into it? The townspeople were talking about what was happening, and one hiding behind the cart. He asked what their master was doing in Aiden's hands. The crowd murmured indignantly. This was the same guard from the Rosa prison, and he attacked this man. Jared decided to take advantage of the situation and started yelling that they wanted to kill him and asking for help. He kept drawing attention to himself by shouting that they wanted to kill him in broad daylight. Aiden ordered him to shut his mouth or he promised him something more. How just bloodshed? Driven into impotent rage, the criminal decided to use his last chance to save himself by taking a knife from his sleeve. He intended to thrust it sharply into Aiden, thinking that he would save himself and that he would go to another world. But suddenly his eyes rolled back and he started falling backwards. Jared was killed. Everyone looked at the gloomy man who had shot him so cold-bloodedly. Jared lay dead at the Sard's feet, and people were shouting that they had killed a man. And then Lord Garrett remembered what Veronica had told him about Jared, that he was supposedly the illegitimate son of a member of parliament. The man made a statement for all to hear, proclaiming Veronica innocent, the real culprit being the one he had just killed. The man said that the criminal was his son, and that due to his incompetence, he allowed his son to do such things. But now he could not allow him to escape responsibility. Having bowed to the warden, he asked Aiden to talk to him alone. The man lamented that it was his fault as a father if he had been harsher with his son. People tried to calm him down, amazed at the nobility of Mr. Anthony. Suddenly everyone turned around to hear a roar that sounded like earthquake. Aiden ran, remembering that Veronica was there, and whether everything was okay with her. Anthony glanced unkindly after the fleeing warden, thinking to himself that he was not finished yet. The clearing looked like a battlefield. A charred tree lay on the ground. The earth itself was scorched. At some point, someone grabbed the warden by the pants. It was Hunter White laying on the ground. He babbled for help, expecting to be saved by the one he had recently tried to kill. This is exactly what Aiden answered him. Why on earth would he save his killer? He, with bulging eyes, noted that all noble heroes should act like that. Lord Garrett looked at him, and he appealed to the law, to which Garrett replied that White's employer was clearly not familiar with this. The bounty hunter remembered Jared's words that Aiden, with his noble character, would definitely spare him, and that he would have better conditions in prison. Aiden looked simply and calmly, thinking about his own business, sighing as if realizing that this was what he needed to do. Jared, thinking what kind of idiot was in front of him, asked him to use magic to lift the tree and free him, since he suspects that he broke his spine. To this, our hero snapped that he didn't know such spells, and the real Aiden was no longer there. Then slowly he took out his sword and raised it over the hunter. He, realizing that death was near, thought, that's why he's so weak in fights. This is not real overseer. Garrett's last words were to say hello to Jade. So Aiden was the last thing the bounty hunter White saw before he died. The warden didn't know where Veroni was. Then he began to call her, when he saw from behind the tree that she had curled up into a ball. She asked him not to come closer, but he found it suspicious. Turning behind a tree, he saw Veronica, who was in the process of transformation and without clothes. She screamed from shame. Aiden closed his eyes and exhaled, apologizing, because he thought that she was doing badly. The girl was in a half-human form. She was groping for something to cover herself with. Her clothes were torn to shreds. She began to pull the shirt off the dead White to get dressed, but then the warden took off his cloak and handed it to the girl. They walked down a city street. Aiden asked Veronica if she had completed the transformation. She replied that as soon as her pulse decreased, she would be fine. Our hero noticed that she didn't become a werewolf until the end, to which the girl laughed and said that this is her problem. In her native village and in her family, she was the only one like her, and they constantly laughed at her and made fun of her. One day, Grandma chased away her relatives with a broom because they were teasing her while fooling around. At that time, her mother was alive and pregnant at the time. Then the girl added that it would be better if they never came Silver City. Aiden agreed with her, noting that with a character like hers, it was indeed difficult to survive in this vicious city. He suggested that she return to the village after liberation, but Veronica shook her head sadly. She is ashamed to return, because she boasted so much that will be knocked out in people. How will she now look them in the eye? Suddenly they saw a crowd of poorly dressed people. Aiden was surprised where so many poor people came from. There were old people and young people there who asked the police where the Rosa prison was. Veronica looked at them and couldn't believe it. These were her fellow villagers, relatives. They were looking for her. Local residents passed by and brushed them aside as if they were annoying flies. She suddenly remembered how they all came out to see her off and asked her not to forget them, because the village would always be her home. When Veronica left, she promised to save up enough money and treat them to the most luxurious restaurant. Silver Cities. The girl jumped up from her seat, screaming that she was here. Within a couple of seconds, she was embraced by a crowd of people who loved her. Granny. She hugged her tightly, not wanting to let her go. She cried, looking what an adult. Veronica stood up, to which she, beaming with happiness, asked how they ended up here. They said that as soon as they found out that she had ended up in prison, they decided to go to the city. There was no mail in their village, and it took them half a month to get here. Here Veronica looked at their feet, their worn-out shoes, some of whose toes were sticking out of their boots. They started babbling that they had been looking for her all over the city. No one thought that she had been arrested. Seeing the one approaching, Aiden Veronila burst into tears and asked him not to laugh at her. The crowd started shouting at him, "Why him holds the girl?" To which he hastened to reassure them that this was a misunderstanding and that Veronica would soon will be acquitted. A couple of gentlemen in expensive clothes looked at the residents. The man angrily, he barked, calling the crowd poverty that was not allowed walk around the city. But you need to sit within their boundaries, slums. The girl with the baby suggested going back since everything had worked out so well. But one guy dropped the idea that Veronica had promised to treat them to dinner at a restaurant. Then someone pulled him painfully by the ear and hissed that their Veronica cannot be seen with a crowd of villagers. She is now a city dweller. The girl felt very uncomfortable because she had no money and she felt ashamed. At this point, Aiden intervened and stated that they had come such a long way and should stay here for a couple of days, and Veronica had a bonus in her pocket. The girl's eyes widened in surprise. What kind of bonus? The villagers were no less amazed. Rummaging through this pocket of the coat that the warden had given her, she saw a handful of coins. They were gold pounds. People's mouths dropped open. They were seeing this imperial money with their own eyes for the first time. The girl held the money in her hands, not knowing what to do. Then Aiden said, "How about feeding everyone in the restaurant?" At this time, a breathless Frenda ran up with 2 guards. She breathed a sigh of relief upon seeing the Lord alive. He cheerfully approached his assistant and invited her to go and have dinner with him, Veronica and her friends, at a restaurant. And then he glanced at a dumbfounded couple gentlemen who froze like statues, that there will always be those idlers wandering around the city who will blurt out something indecent in the direction of decent people. Frenda took the hint, took out her weapon. Her partners did the same and menacingly headed towards the gentleman. They ran with shouts and curses. Left alone with Veronica, Aiden asked her to accept this money as moral compensation for this whole misunderstanding. A noisy crowd walked down the street. Frenda offered to walk them home, and Veronica couldn't believe her luck. She turned around and saw Aiden standing and looking somewhere into the distance. I wonder what he was thinking about. The girl covered her face with a cloak, pulled her hat down over her face so that her tears would not be visible, and followed the crowd. Veronica's case went well. Everything was resolved safely. Anthony did not take a lawyer. During the interrogation, everything became clear. Everything fell into place. It was pouring rain, but Anthony didn't notice it as he walked past the crowd. He willingly shot his son in the back. It was so unlike his usual behavior. Aiden and Frenda looked at him and thought he did it to incident did not become public knowledge so as not to lose his status as a member of the government. Or perhaps there were more terrible things going on here and they could come to light. After the case was completed, Veronica and her fellow villagers returned home to the village. And here he is planning with Goddess Mel and the Feria in the dungeon, who was interested in whether the prisoners had received the promised benefits, to which Aiden noted that it was strange that a goddess would be interested in such things. She laughed and replied that it was not her fault, but his, and that she understood perfectly well what people were thinking. Tolerating and admitting defeat are 2 different things, and for Edward the story is not over yet. She told him that his only means of defense was to effectively use the prisoner's abilities. The game Edward started playing became more and more interesting. It was lunchtime in the prison. The prisoners approached the cook and received their portion. When she came cue the witches gave, she heard behind her back that they were calling her little dog overseer. Approaching the distribution point, she smiled charmingly and loudly asked if there was any other food, as her stomach was bothering her. Pavarala, without taking the cigarette out of her mouth, looked at her and replied that she did. She handed her a honey cake and said that it would help restore her stomach and acclimatize. A smiling Dolly walked away with the cake, while the others shouted that they also had stomach problems, but received ordinary soup. The necromancer came to the library. One of the prisoners said that she didn't have to look for new books. There weren't any. The escort bent down and said that they had brought a new one and she hadn't put it out yet. A happy Arsena ran with the book in her hands, while the girl chased after her and shouted that she would wash her socks if she gave her the book. Arsena opened the book as she walked, remembering that it was secretly distributed among prisoners, only for special merits. The book was about the desires of exotic animals. To the unknown marine, a forest elf came to the creature, stating that she was now its translator, and that the overseer had sent her. The wood elves were good at reading emotions, and any language is a bearer of emotions. The succubus was taking a shower when she heard the familiar voices of a pirate and a horse thief behind her, hole rubbing. The hands asked that there was no security anymore, and where was the money for them. They saw a bag of money and burst out laughing. They said that she became smarter since she had already prepared everything. At this time, the tigress Philippa and the dragonborn Camilla approached and asked the succubus how hard to beat these impudent women. The succubus only smiled with pleasure. She remembered the overseer's promise for her help. When he left the cell after penetrating Veronica's mind, she asked him to give her the 2 offenders, since they remained unpunished. When he was leaving, he threw it to her so that she wouldn't overdo it. Standing under the streams of water, she smiled lustfully and told the performers to beat the 2 of them half to death. The master sat in his office and gave the order to inform the Queen of the Ants that her precious daughter Rose was in prison. The servant, trembling, asked if this was the one crazy, which experiments on people. He replied that yes, Aiden will now answer for everything. The wood elf Gilala was one of the prisoners, but with some privileges. Not fast, not tall, not elegant, and not deadly. That's not her thing. Gilala looked like a cute, chubby little thing, which had its advantages. This cute creature ended up in prison because of a drug industry blunder. When she was brought in literally like a rabbit, she thought the end had come. But she was having a very good time, going out and walking around the prison. Frenda was interested in order. Is she okay? Is no one offending her? But popularity also has its downsides. Not all prisoners understood why her ability to read emotions made her a prison translator. But in fact, her work was very important. The problems of prisoners, for example, like constipation in a sea creature, can lead to riots, conflicts, this like the butterfly effect. She is a kind of angel of mercy and savior in this prison. Once again, Aiden asked questions her about the results, and Galala reported on the successes with a radiant look. And then the warden said that there was one more thing, although he was not faithful in it. Gilala replied that it was a trifle for her, and that he should not doubt her professionalism. But when they came to this prisoner's cell, the little one was speechless, wondering how this was even possible. From the point of view of the elves, all things have emotions. Mountains, rivers, even skeletons carry an emotional charge about their lived life. But this girl, the elf, could not understand whether she belonged to the world of the living at all. Not a single emotion could be detected in her. Gilala described her as a piece of flesh that can only eat and digest food. No thoughts or emotions. Aiden noted that it seemed like it would take longer than he thought. The elf saw a cut on the warden's finger and asked what it was. He replied that it was an accidental scratch. He sat in the girl's cell without emotion and began the lesson by reading the fairy tale Cinderella. Gilala looked at them, not understanding what he wanted to achieve. For her to become a normal child. But then it would be easier to teach a bear to ride a bicycle. The market square was buzzing with sales of ointments, whitening products, hair growth products, and anti-wrinkle products. The saleswoman saw a man looking out for something, and approaching him, she asked if she could help the gentleman. Trader Clothadine a robe, she led him into a dark room. This gentleman was looking for her, asking if it was her daughter who was in prison, Rosa. The woman looked at the gray-haired gentleman with a sly squint and asked if they wanted to arrange her escape. The man replied that he could arrange for her to be imprisoned so that she could get it out herself. She reached for her bottles, predatorily asking if he was tired of them. Live, if he wants sharpened, put her behind bars. At that moment, Jared's father came in and said that he didn't need to introduce himself, and she wouldn't be harmed in prison. They had a plan. She glanced at him and remembered that it was him that Lord Aiden had sued. He replied that Aiden was their common enemy, and gave her the plan of Rose Prison. He suggested to get acquainted with this document as for infiltrating the prison. They will try to weaken the effect of the magic circle. His agents are already in prison and will help carry out everything from the inside. He offered to act as a mediator to her, asking if she was interested in the further plan. She laughed, adding that there was clearly someone higher up behind him, to which he replied that it was his business. He just wanted Warden Aiden dead. The woman, smiling silently, took out one of her glowing flasks. While the men watched her actions, she quickly drank the contents. A second later, swirling in a whirlwind, the one they called the Ant Queen began to change appearance. And here she is, a young, attractive woman, declaring that her name will be Mary. Her criminal case is smuggling. The men gasped and applauded silently. The girl was reading the book without emotion, when suddenly she heard a voice in her head saying that her mother was already coming to save her. The girl looked up from her book and up at the window where the light was coming from. She also looked indifferently in the direction from which her name Evans was heard. Frenda went into a diner in the city and bought herself a sandwich, and during her break she decided to have a snack outside the prison. Walking down the street, she began to eat on the go. Being in your thoughts, suddenly she heard footsteps, and turning around, she saw the shadows of men running away. Frenda glared with displeasure and thought that it was bold of them to follow her like this in broad daylight, and not for the first time. Suddenly, one of the men jumped out and ran towards her. Without thinking, the girl took out a pistol and aimed at the stranger. He fell to his knees with a bouquet of flowers. The man looked reverently at Frenda and handed her a bouquet, proposing to marry him. The girl dropped her sandwich and, in silent amazement, announced that she was already married. The fan ran away in tears, saying his heart was broken. The others hobbled off in all directions, saying there was nothing to be done, they had no chance. In the office, Friend gave Aiden a newspaper, showing that Rose was currently the most discussed topic. When he was hunting for Jared, a journalist filmed and recorded it. The girl also added, embarrassed, that the guards' figures and uniforms were being discussed. Journalist describes the guards as the women of his dreams with ideal proportions. Aiden was delighted. This was not bad at all. The guards would have admirers, since many of them were unmarried due to the nature of their work. At that moment, one of the guards knocked and entered, saying that she wanted to quit, since she had taken a job at the women's prison in Calendula. Aiden didn't mind, as there were more prospects there than in the Silver City. The supervisor signed the necessary documents, and the employee thanked him for his understanding. At that moment, a prison guard burst into the office. Doctor, having said that he had received documents from the medical school, Aiden then thought that he had also decided to leave. And they were not the last. Statements came one after another, scorts about leaving. It was at night, surprisingly, there was little security, and negotiations began in the cells about what was going on. The forest elf was very worried. She felt a tense emotional background. Aiden didn't have time to sign his resignation letters the next morning. Everyone was contacted from somewhere and offered good positions. Frenda heard the girls talking among themselves. One of them was asked out by her employer. Another was invited to a trendy restaurant. Frenda was concerned that such a large number of staff departures would affect the normal functioning of the prison. She asked to work for a month until they found new staff, but they refused to even listen. They attacked Frenda, saying that she wanted them to rot here. Their psyche was already damaged. They would leave anyway. Aiden slammed his fist on the table in anger and ordered them to shut up and stop yelling like little children. He reminded them of the honor of the uniform, of the need to complete the current tasks. They are responsible for people's lives. But this did not help. The employees began to throw down their weapons and leave. Aiden thought there would be an article in the newspaper about the security guards being fired. He remembered Anthony's face after the meeting and thought to himself, "This is how you decided to take revenge." Dozens of abandoned top hats, holsters, and weapons lay scattered around the office. Unrest began to spread throughout the prison. The tiger woman screamed that she wanted to eat. There were only a few guards who ordered her to shut her mouth. No one would go anywhere without Lord Aiden's order. Aiden looked at the entrance to the prison. No one came. Those who left will never return. Frenda was worried that the labor shortage would result in riots. What to do now? Frenda told the warden that the situation was close to catastrophic. At that moment, Veronica peeked out from behind a tree and, blushing, asked if they were really recruiting staff. Frenda exclaimed, "Didn't the girl then return with everyone to the village?" Veronica became even more embarrassed, saying that they invited her, but she so wanted to learn a lot from Lord Aiden. She had been watching them since early morning, and it was strange to her that there were so few people today. At this moment, one of the guards jumped out and shouted that a riot was about to start. Gorgon joyfully felt the taste of freedom and panic among the authorities. The rest bared their fangs, anticipated as they emerged from their cells and tear the remaining guards to pieces. Gilala felt the bloody emotions of rebellion with every fiber of her being, and she was afraid. Back at the prison, the guards told Aiden that things were getting out of control. The succubus called him and asked him to protect her, knowing that in the event of a riot, she would also end up in the meat grinder. How suddenly she saw Veronica in uniform emerging from the shadows. The succubus screamed at her to leave, as there was real horror going on here. Lord Aiden sternly asked who was the instigator of the rebellion, and Veronica walked forward with confident steps. Everyone was amazed. The tigress screamed that the cowardly wolf cub had returned. Apparently things were really bad in prison. Frenda, seeing Veronica's confused face, told her that if she didn't manage to gain authority right away, it would be difficult to communicate with criminals in the future. Veronica pointed her finger at the bandit trio and ordered them to be taken out. They only cackled in response. Before they could be taken out, the girl, with the fury of a wolf, stamped all three of them to the floor. All three were lying unconscious on the floor in the hallway. There was a deathly silence. Veronica asked if anyone else wanted to try her fist. One of the guards admired how such a fragile girl could have so much strength. Aiden noticed that Veronica was an excellent student at the police academy, and the people at the academy weren't particularly fond of other races. The succubus said admiringly, "Wow, let Veronica jump into her cell for old time's sake." Veronica smiled as the succubus blew kisses at her as Frenda reminded her that she was now a guard. The treasurer arrived, Silver City of Doug, who congratulated Aiden on his ability to run the prison even with minimal resources. He made a list of the guards who had left and announced that Rose's allowance was being reduced to 600 pounds. Aiden was perplexed, and Frenda shouted that the maintenance of one magic circle costs 650,000. Most of the money goes towards maintaining the magic circle, which can cover the entire city if necessary. The remaining 150 are used for prison expenses. For example, the vampires need fresh blood. 55,000 in sealing holes in the walls and other household work. 15,000 goes towards security guards' salaries, uniforms, and equipment. Frenda concluded that even if all the security guards quit, there wouldn't be enough money. So how could they cut back, content by 200,000? The treasurer said that he was misunderstood. With the abilities and power of Overseer Aiden, the magic circle no longer needed to work at full capacity. The girl screamed that the city would be doomed, and Doug remarked that she doubted the strength of her boss. The treasurer left saying that everyone believed in Lord Garrett's power, and Frenda sadly asked what they should do now. Aiden was overcome by the darkest thoughts. Chaos could not be allowed. Then he told the stunned Frenda that she was now his deputy while he was not in prison. He rubbed his eyes tiredly and said that he needed to think about how to get through this time. The girl put on the deputy chief's uniform with a determined look. The first to start giggling were the beaten two, who said that Lord Aiden was incapable of fulfilling his duties and had shifted them onto others. Words were heard from the cameras. "Why are you here? They abandoned you and you are sitting here for pennies." The girl remembered the words of the warden. The changes that had taken place in the prison did not seem like a simple coincidence. Shortage of prison security. Weakening of the magic circle. This is a conspiracy from above. Frenda coldly ordered that these two be flogged, which don't know how to behave. The pirate and the horse thief laughed that they had received those 20 blows and threatened to take revenge on her as will come out from here. Frenda ordered that the baton be handed over to Veronica so that she could deliver the blows. The two screamed from the sting. They were in their right mind to let the werewolf beat them. Aiden was not that cruel. Frenda told them that no one cares whether they live or die, since they should think before doing anything. As the two of them were being dragged out of the cell, Frenda added that there was no prison doctor, so whether they would survive their punishment or not was up to them. Afterwards, the girl appointed her assistants as heads of sectors, giving them assignments. One of the prisoners, hearing the terrible screams, wondered if Frenda was really that angry. Her neighbor, a powerful lady with muscles who looked like a thug, said that her ears were already hurting. Dali received news from her furry assistant about a lack of funding. She was thinking out loud, and the necromancer did not, breaking away. She said that if she wanted to, she could run away. When the witch said that she would report her in that case, Arsena replied that if Aiden lost power, she would escape before Dali. But for now, a contract is a contract. The prisoners were taken out for a walk, and one kept glancing sideways at the exit. Frenda yelled at her not to dare to look and to move forward. The girl commanded that now all prisoners would walk in groups of 10. This is power, Veronica thought, how she can control, and Lord Aiden trusts her in everything. Isabella, who had gone from being a supervisor to a superintendent, ran up to her and said that she would be patrolling with Veronica. Veronica happily exclaimed that in the future she also wanted to grow to such a position to help Lord Aiden. Isabella said that they need to watch their food intake now. Prisoners, and later they will be replaced. At that moment, carts with new ones arrived prisoners. Supervisor Haley shouted at them that, for what they sent new ones, but there's nowhere for them plant, there aren't enough hands. In the chamber of the cart sat the smiling Queen Ant. Hearing it said that there was an official order for her transfer to Rose. They gave her a prison uniform and brought her to a cell. It was dark and her neighbor was lying under a blanket. After asking if she was new, the succubus jumped up and said that this was her 8th visit to Rose because of her love for Lord Aiden, and the guards were like older sisters to her, having played with her since she was little. She said with a businesslike and authoritative air that if the new girl called her big sister, she would help her in everything. The new girl smiled and obediently agreed to wash her older sister's clothes. At this time, when it was already dark, someone started a fire. The guards started shouting fire, panic started, and as it turned out, the dormitory started burning. Frenda and others, security guards. We didn't immediately understand what to do. Confusion began all around. Veronica and Frenda met eyes after hearing some kind of growl. In front of Veronica stood demonic creatures in shackles and prison uniforms. 3 creatures rushed at the girl, breaking through the defense of the guards. The guards scattered, while Frenda shouted that they had to hold their ground. The prisoner watched this scene from her cell, thinking that Frenda not enough authority. Superintendent Jenny, who was in the colony, shouted to the guards to run to the dining room, where a riot broke out. The huge girl also calmly said out loud that Rose was about to collapse. Her neighbor said that Frenda's small losses would not lead to global problems. The instigator needed to be found. At this time, Veronica, Frenda, and 2 guards entered the fight with the rebellious trio. Suddenly, Aiden appeared in the aisle, wishing the ladies a good evening. The guns were pointed at the rioters, but Aiden calmly walked forward. Those who rebelled were ordered to return to their cells immediately. Aiden walked down this corridor and said that he just stepped away for a short while to have a cup of tea and think about why the security guards quit and everything like that. He addressed the prisoners and asked how they dared to attack prison security. The bloodsucker grinned and told him that there were not enough guards and he was no longer in power control the prison. Let him confess already. Aiden turned to her words and said, "Since when did groundhogs become so arrogant?" The vampiress broke the bars in anger and screamed that she would kill him and drown him in spit. Aiden replied that she was very confident in her words, but he would only give them one chance. He came up with a plan, because in order to contain such a number of prisoners, you need the same number of guards. Quickly recruited won't work. And if he makes some of the prisoners volunteer guards, he will kill 2 birds with 1 stone. He understood how risky it was, but there was no choice. He ordered Frenda and Veronica to follow him. The cameras would be open. The Ant Queen watched and wondered what this guy was planning by opening the cameras, because chaos would break out. Succubus with curiosity was watching what was happening when Mary asked permission to ask her. She threw that "let it beasks." Then the cellmate smiled radiantly and asked if she knew a prisoner named Evans, who is also called the Reaper of Dirty Blood. The succubus looked at her suspiciously, asking why she decided to take an interest in the prisoners. To which Mary, still smiling sweetly, justified herself by saying that she was simply the #1 killer and that there were legends about her. It was just curiosity. The succubus said that she already thought that she had decided to choose another mentor, although she wouldn't have succeeded anyway. The succubus revealed that Evans' privileged prisoner. For the warden, she is like a daughter. He teaches her to read and write, visiting her every day. Then she added that she is not jealous at all, considering that she and Aiden are an unofficial couple. While the succubus was chirping, Mary turned purple with anger. Her Evans was like a daughter to Aiden. She remembered how she showed her daughter people, calling them bad, and those who wanted to kill them needed to get rid of them. Her baby then destroyed everyone when they ran to kill the queen and shouting that she was a heretic. This girl is her perfect creation, the best of them all. The girl used magical power to create such a powerful wave that all these people burned up. People were burning alive, and she was proud of her daughter. The girl asked if those people were dead. Everything around was strewn with charred skeletons. Remembering this, she squeezed the succubus so hard that she screamed that she wanted to break her or something. Aiden confided in Friend about his plan, and she realized his intentions to release the prisoners in order to discover the ringleader. Aiden told her that they would meet at a secret location the following day during the prisoners' lunch. Frenda, walking down the corridor with Veronica, whispered to her that Lord Aiden wanted to tell her something, but he was embarrassed. Veronica said that she could handle everything, but Frenda whispered in her ear that after the transformation she had torn her pants and she needed to get another set. Veronica, her cheeks burning with shame, saw that she was walking around with a hole in her pants, exposing the butt. The Gorgon stood there in complete confusion, not believing her eyes that the cameras had actually been opened. Standing in the prison courtyard, the prisoners whispered what Aiden was planning. The prison gates were also open. Who would dare? Laughing, Isabella with a camera asked who dared. They just needed to come out and they were free. Prisoners, they offered to try the Gorgon, saying she was fearless. Everyone looked, but was afraid to be the first. Gorgon seemed to want to, but remembered Aiden's hellish punishments and refused. Fear was stronger. She remembered how he held her over the fiery mouth and said that he would leave her before the morning. If in the morning will survive, then he will take it. At that moment, a chicken jumped out clucking. The cook screamed for them to catch her, as it was their dinner. Isabella tried catch the bird, but it jumped out and, clucking, found itself outside the prison gates. Everyone pointed, "Look!" The chicken walked calmly to freedom. The Gorgon joyfully pointed at the chicken and said that since she was fine, they certainly had nothing to be afraid of. At that moment, a bright, fiery pillar of a magic circle rose up, causing everyone to recoil. A second later, the carcass flew out burnt fried chicken, just in time for dinner. Isabella screamed that it took her so long to set it up. Magical. The circle is not for the chicken to step on. At this time, rebellious, the prisoner grabbed the forest elf and said that since there was a lot of trash here, it could be thrown like this bag with sand to break all circles of protection. Prisoners, they watched in horror as the crozier asked for help, dangling its little legs. The tiger woman said that there are not many circles here. You just need to rush at once and there is no need to kill anyone. The elf holding her growled that they were prisoners. Let everyone see what would happen to Aiden's servants. She raised her arms and was ready to throw Galala when she was shot. The warden noted that prisoners who did not want to escape should not be involved in this. The second one added that they are still prisoners, so let the mayor watching behind the words and think what they do. One of the guards announced that those who do not want to escape will return to their cells with the rest. Addresses with cannon fodder. Tigress noticed that it had become much cleaner and suggested discussing what to do with Aiden. Suddenly she looked in horror at the person who entered. It was her mistress, Austin. It was the princess of the House of Malbus, ruler of the Beastmen. She ordered the prisoner to stand up, since she had still disgraced their family by submitting to weaklings. She stated that when the need for the magic circle fell, she and the others came to have fun. The other rulers noticed that they were leaving, but there was no need to run away. It would lead to war. Let them continue in the same spirit. Mary looked at their seals all over their bodies, wondering what ancient demon they served. The Beastmen had their own deity named Malbus. The magic that came from this deity was incredibly strong. She remembered being told that families who received the power of an ancient demon could destroy entire cities. At this time, the cook called for volunteers to help in the kitchen. She stated that some of the employees left because they didn't like her food, which very hurts her chef's pride. Assistants will be allowed to try desserts. By prisoners, they started arguing about who would go, but Dolly got ahead of them. With a radiant look, she declared her excellent reputation and golden hands. Arsena looked at this picture and chuckled, as if to say that she was also a saint. She added to Dali that she didn't want to hear anything about desserts, and the girls who were now crying freely came first, but the witch cut off this conversation. Frenda approached Arsena and offered to temporarily replace the librarian who had quit. It would be better than sitting in a cell, and all the books would be available, to which Arsena beamed with happiness. She ran so fast that Dali managed to see her back and also threw it to her. Look how she changed her shoes. Mary watched them thinking how small the world was, since she met this couple here, and Dolly obviously didn't feel well at all since she was going to cook. During a secret meeting, Aiden and his team discussed that all dangerous areas were being monitored by his agents, and that prisoners would consider the prison gates a potentially dangerous place. Mary also played her part, studying the map Anthony had given her, all the prison passages where there were the fewest guards, calculating the warden's actions. She figured that the magic circle and the guards wouldn't work anyway. In power to control everyone, they gave the prisoners conditional freedom of movement, and her Evans belongs to the golden prisoners. Aiden let Evans go, saying that classes were over for today, and the girl also said goodbye to him. Meanwhile, the two people Aiden was waiting for were running. He knew that the barrels of alcohol were they sense wherever you are. The thug inhaled the smell coming from the barrels and asked who they were for, to which the warden replied that it was payment for overtime work. Having trapped them, he casually pointed to the prison ground, saying that it needed to be cultivated. We need to gather people to plant and grow vegetables for the prison canteen. But he's afraid the prisoners will make a mess, so he'll need security to work overtime. The brute with the glowing eyes offered her help, because she used to be the leader of the mercenaries. She asked to leave this job to her. She doesn't need the money, but she hasn't drunk good wine for so many years. Aiden seemed thoughtful for a moment, then said he would give her a chance and save her money. At the same time, smiling charmingly, he drew her attention to the area. She couldn't handle it alone, and time was running out. The thug's astonished friend stood there with the look of someone who had just had a revelation and realization. Aiden nodded in her direction, as if to say, "Ask her." She understood what needed to be done. The brute named Lysil came up to stun to my friend Aya, and asked what kind of charades she was putting on here. While Aya explained that Aiden wanted them to involve other prisoners, but then they would be like black sheep and consider the warden's servants, Mary listened to their dialogue. Lysil was called the Butcher. She was in charge of 12 mercenaries who destroyed 1,000 vampire knights. The Ant Queen stroked her daughter's head, admiring Aiden's resourcefulness in getting out of a difficult situation by bribing the prisoners. Then she turned to her daughter, saying that it was not time to wake her up yet. Let's wait for the right moment. It seemed a shadow of sadness crossed the grandfather's face. She remembered how they killed. Her mother wants to repeat the past again. When dusk fell, Mary picked up a stone to attract the guard's attention, opening a scar from the stomach, from where purple tentacles were visible creeping in all directions. The warden told her to leave. There was no one else in that area except them. Mary covered her stomach hole and followed the guard. She asked female guards did she have anyone else in mind, to which she replied that they could bring in the vampire from cell 56. Meanwhile, the bloody princess is angry threw it out your dinner pork blood. They told her that it was punishment for escaping. Let her be glad that she got off with only pig's blood. She handed it over with a scream, "Ident a message to keep you awake at night." Squeezing bottle of blood, she felt her hand burning and threw the bottle away. The blood spread. The vampire was burning and smoking from the anger that had overwhelmed her at the warden. At that moment, Mary entered the cell and stepped on the cancelled dinner vampires. She said that she came to her on business. In a rage, the blood princess rushed at the impudent woman, declaring how a commoner dared touch her dinner, or whether she wanted to become one herself. Vampire boiling. She looked at this scoundrel with rage, who wasn't afraid of her at all and was even smiling. Mary replied that he should try to bite her, but he would die from his own curse. The bloody princess asked how she knew. Then Mary lifted her t-shirt and tentacles appeared from there. She grabbed the vampire by the face, and out of surprise she bit Mary's hand, to which she calmly added that everything was fine. She had been looking forward to this dinner. After that, she felt her strength begin to recover, and the curse did not work. And the queen offered to join her with a smile, noting that she knew how to remove seals from prisoners. Frenda climbed up to the secret place where Aiden had arranged to meet her. She walked into the room the warden had described to her, and saw traps and a warning from Aiden in front of her. It was convenient to watch from the window running prisoners, and they had no idea that they were being watched. Aiden said that the prisoners had let down their guard, and it was time to move on to the next step of the plan. He divided the prisoners into 3 types. This is a division will help to properly distribute resources and control prisoners for their own benefit and advantage. The first type are bloodthirsty. Because of their instincts to kill, they cannot be re-educated. They are the main rebels. The second category are those who, for various reasons, had to end up in prison. A clear example being Gilal. They are neutral in their type. The third category are those who ended up here because of the external environment. Here they feel more comfortable than outside. These are ideal prisoners. The main task is to create a faction and find the boss set against each other prisoners among themselves. This will be the opportunity to save Rose and neutralize the instigators of the rebellion. The ants were crawling towards Wall's prisons, feeling his mistress. At this time, the vampire whose seal had been removed, having torn a piece out of her chest, splashed her blood. Her bloodthirsty cellmates saw that the seal was removed and realized that vampires can use blood to make weapons. They too wanted free oneself from seals and restore its full strength. The Blood Princess assembled a team by making a deal with Mary, having promised prepare a potion that will remove the seals. Mary, leaving to collect materials for the potion, gave her the order to gather as many people as possible. The tigress and her partner were wary when they found out that this was a new girl, who she was like. They would say that she was a smuggler. Then she decided to show her power of black transformation. The prisoners recoiled in fear. To each of them your own tentacles she made a kind of seal, promising that when they were free they would buy an anti-parasitic potion, but for now this was her insurance. She also threatened that if anyone revealed her identity or did not obey, they would be killed. The Gorgon watched as worms crawled into her hand and babbled that she understood everything. After that, she didn't want to argue. The prisoners left the canteen after their meal satisfied with their food. I wanted such treats were every day. The warden stopped the prisoners who were going to their cells, declaring that they were being moved to new ones. This concerned everyone staying in rows. Everyone was sent to their own floor in a new cell. Prisoner 2323, a tall girl with a cross-shaped scar on her face, was released early, to which she stated in surprise that her sentence ends next month. The supervisor said that this was the boss's order, so all questions should be directed to him. Frenda carried out the order spread out obedient prisoners. At this time, walkings on prison. In the courtyard, particularly aggressive prisoners were talking among themselves and plotting an escape plan. Veronica ordered returning to their cells. They began to resent the fact that they were given 3 days of free movement. The tigress suggested not to anger the guards and to calmly return to the cells. Veronica brought her squad, asking Frenda where to house them, surprised at how smoothly everything went. Frenda noted that when the rebels behave submissively, one needs to be especially vigilant. The huge pigwoman screamed why her cell was occupied, and security immediately headed towards her. They issued an order to change the cameras due to bad behavior. The aggressive bunch immediately flared up. Why should these happen orders? But then the Gorgon stopped them, saying, "Is this bad? Now all the like-minded people are nearby and will be able to talk." Keeping an eye on this, Mary watched trying to uncover the boss's plan. Suddenly it dawned on her. She remembered that the cells marked black in Anthony's plan were where the noisiest prisoners were placed, as they had good soundproofing. The tigress screamed for anyone to join in, but no one heard her or heard her. Distorted. Someone even screamed that they weren't allowed to sleep normally. The roar of the rioters was so loud that many simply covered their ears because their heads were buzzing. Mary concluded that they had decided to do this to mock the rebels, but Aiden was simply buying time. Here she heard someone saying that if they continued to feed her like this, she was ready to live here forever. Others supported her by saying that there was only suffering outside, but here it was like a sanatorium. The queen ant shuddered, which meant it wasn't all that simple. There were a lot of like-minded people here, people who liked it here. So Aiden's model was put into action, prisoners seated according to the classification, where those who were satisfied with the prison were. Those who asked others that you really want to stay here, everything is fine. And the red zone with someone who was ready to explode at any moment. And in the middle stood out the central chamber. This chamber was for the prisoners chosen by the Lord. They became Lisil and her friend and advisor Aya. the ones Aiden was betting on. Frenda shouted to Liesel was engaged in, whether she is selecting prisoners for outdoor work. The warden is waiting for a list. They were silent, thinking that they had become Aiden's servants and everyone would find out about it. Well, what else could you expect from the boss? Liesel stood and looked at the coveted barrel of wine, while Aya reasoned that Aiden was simply looking for cannon fodder, and the rebels were strong and it was better not to oppose them. The bully asked her friend if she should refuse the warden, but standing in the cell and thinking, her partner replied that the situation had changed. She pointed out to Liesel that they were in itself center, and around them the prisoners were gathered in a special way, in sectors. These were guys with minor deadlines like a killer giant Julie, who was licking her lips and asking to tell where the thug got the alcohol, smelled it. Or type werewolf fox. Mendy, who is wanted on the loose. She is a master of seducing men. Having learned about working in the open air, her first thing she asked, "Will there be any handsome guys there?" These prisoners call a prison their home. They don't want to be free. Aya thoughtfully estimated how many there were, 200 or even more. It turns out the overseer doesn't need cannon fodder. Aiden selected candidates based on mutually beneficial cooperation. The girl saw the whole picture, realizing that the warden needed strength to confront the rebels. She blurted out that they were chosen to be bosses. Aiden probably studied the business well. Who would be better suited for this role than the captain of the mercenaries? Liesel replied seriously that bosses sounded good, but they would still remain the overseer's lackeys, and she reminded them how their team was destroyed. And they abandoned her, she said sadly, that the owner gets rid of the dog when he doesn't need it. Aya noticed that everything was different now. The boss was on their side and they could attack. The rebels' goal was to escape, not fight them. She noted that there was a benefit if they could convince the others. Besides, it was nice to call Liesel boss, wasn't it great? Liesel didn't have time to yell what is work for a drink, as the voices of those wishing to do so were heard. The succubus lit up with happiness, asking not to forget her. Mary thought with displeasure how a small indulgence could offset the desire to run away. She was thinking about how to conquer these new bosses, and she needed the support of Dolly, who at that moment was watching the big guy, and her friend chuckled that they will be turned into trash. She remembered how Dolly kicked her out of the coven, hit her and said that she would no longer be her mentor. Being expelled from the coven, a community of witches, meant loneliness, and she was charged with breaking the rules. Mary had already begun to experiment on people back then. She justified herself by saying that they were just a couple of beggars. No one would even know. Dali then sternly and contemptuously told her that she did not even repent of her sins. Master Lamia chased after her and she was forced to cross the border and enter the restricted area. But the anger of the chief master of Lamia was so strong that it seemed that it would tear her apart on the spot. The Forbidden Zone is the most dangerous place where almost no one survives, even with superpowers. She thought how Dali's teacher would be surprised that she not only survived the Forbidden Zone, but also mastered the secret technique and created Evans. Even the Great Four Witches will kneel before her. Aiden gave the released prisoner her personal belongings and congratulated her on her release. He asked her name and what she did. The girl replied that her name was Carol, and she was a bounty hunter. He wished her luck in her freedom, and to keep herself under control, to which Carol asked in surprise if it was true that she was being released. She beat up a security guard who called her a flat-bottomed woman and made fun of her bust. The girl said that during her year of stay she only saw executions prisoners. But I haven't seen anyone get released early. Aiden needs something from her. He put some money in front of her and asked her to tell him more about her profession. Mary Kameto, the dining room mirrors Liesel's lists of names report. The girls said that if they could also drink, then this would not be a prison but paradise. Mary went to Dali, who was dining alone, and said that she and her mistress had not seen each other for a long time. Dali looked at her distantly, silently, not reacting in any way. Then she smiled and said that she didn't recognize her right away, but she heard that she became a mother and was all busy. Mary irritated. It was such a mockery. She said that since she knows about her daughter, the goal should be clear. In response to her offer to help, Dolly chuckled and said why she thought she wanted to run away. She was generally having a good time. Mary threw her that the position of tame dog Anki, this is not something a witch like her can dream of, and he didn't give her the best job. Dolly did not deny it, and noted that her former student was quite observant. Mary, realizing that the witch trusted few people, decided to prove her sincerity by releasing tentacles from herself. At that moment, a satisfied Aiden received a list of those willing to work. 202 prisoners were found, which was quite enough. He voiced a plan to grow potatoes, which would be used in the canteen for food, and one could also learn to distill alcohol from them. The idea of distilling alcohol really inspired Lucille. She beaming, she said that she would take care of everything. But what they in the future? Hearing from Aiden left them speechless. He decided to send them to the market for potatoes, since everyone was busy and there was no one to buy them. He gathered a team to help them. Gilala. As a forest elf, she was well versed in the varieties. The werefox Mendy and the giantess Julie. They were carrying signs, and some were even in shackles. They couldn't believe their eyes that they were just going to the market like that. Security guard Isabel warned them that they need to return early so that the magic circle does not injure them. Meanwhile, Mary was demonstrating to her teacher what she had learned in the Forbidden Zone, namely the art of prosperity. Everything she touches will grow at an extraordinary rate. She gave an example with chicken, which in a few seconds became a chicken. She said that if you try this on a magic circle, it will begin to expand and collapse. Mary said that she knows about the contract with Aiden. If you break it, death occurs, but thanks to the ritual of prosperity, the problem can be solved. Through accelerated growth, the object reaches a critical point and splits apart. This way Dali will have a new body and she will be able to resist curse. Having completed the demonstration of the experiment with the forked chicken, she triumphantly asked whether the mistress would be satisfied with this result. Dali grimaced and ordered them to leave the dining room immediately. Then she would pretend that nothing had happened. First Mary was taken aback, but then she laughed evilly and said that it was her big mistake. She wants Mary and Aiden to fight each other, kill each other. Why, isn't it easier to cooperate to this? Dali laughed, saying that her former student was not like that before Smart. An aggressive group entered the canteen where the prisoners were having lunch, determined to start a riot. We didn't make it in time, had lunch. There was nothing to ask them. As they pounced on those sitting, they attacked Aiden's servants, tearing them to pieces until they bled. Mary once again suggested to the teacher that he either think about her proposal or not interfere. Passers-by turned to look at the group of prisoners walking through the market. The girls felt constrained, except for Mendy, who made eyes at every passing man. Carol with her group followed behind this group, carrying out Aiden's task. Aiden paid her bail and asked her to follow the group to the market. When attempting to escape, Overseer gave the order to kill on the spot. The girls looked at him with doubt, Slum, who passed by asking Jalala if they were going the right way. There were no potatoes in sight here, to which the elf assured them that her instincts would not fail her. The further they walked, the more they felt the seal on their necks begin to weaken. Mendy was the first to speak out loud. Aya became very anxious, especially when Mendy carelessly. She clarified that they were going to leave the magic circle. Gilala threw the sign off her chest and asked the others if they were really idiots or just pretending, and that it would be better to go further away and plan an escape. Frenda and Aiden were discussing whether Jalala should decide to escape, and the warden noticed that she had not visited Evans for several days. He noted that if Gilala were a child, then there would be nothing strange. But considering that she is 170 years old and more experienced than everyone else, it looks like she decided to run away. Meanwhile, when the others looked at the elf with disapproval, she reminded them that she lived in constant fear, that because of her appearance she was the first to get into trouble, and that she was tired of being humiliated. She remembered the last incident, when she was almost killed by rioting prisoners. She stated that they were healthy people who knew how to defend themselves and had no right to judge her. Elf suggested using the 10 coins Aiden gave her to buy potatoes to escape. Mendy was the first to respond, saying that the seal had weakened significantly and the time was indeed right, and besides, she had a lot of lovers who could shelter them. But as she noted, one must make one's way through the forest carefully. Since she had cuckolded many witches, so she had many enemies, Aya and Lucille decided to stay away from this couple. After Mendy started making eyes at Lucille with an offer to have dinner, Aya interrupted the squabble and said that it was all strange. Why did Aiden send them alone? Were there really not a couple of workers available? Besides, he allowed them to reach the edge of the magic circle. At this moment, Gilala felt vibrations of tension, surveillance, dozens of eyes were watching them. She burst into tears and cried that she had chosen the wrong path and that they needed to go get potatoes. Aya too felt extraordinary tension. It was a trap from the very beginning. He gave them the illusion of freedom. They were watched by dozens of Carol's mercenaries, ready to shoot at any moment. Carol ordered her people to sit quietly. It seemed their presence was beginning to be noticed. Feeling the tension building to its limit, Gilala, in tears of fear, screamed that she needed to go and not keep Mr. Aiden waiting. Meanwhile, Aiden was having a lesson with Evans, telling that if you want to tame wolves, make tame dogs out of them. That to teach someone loyalty, you need to let them know affection. Evans thoughtfully noted that this meant that Little Red Riding Hood could tame the wolf and make him her dog, and then he wouldn't eat her grandmother. To which Aiden noted that nothing in this world is absolute. Everything depends only on ourselves. At that moment, the girl saw images of her creation. Darkness, slime, emptiness. A guard burst into the office, shouting that there was a riot in the cafeteria, and that we needed to escape immediately. The warden was taken aback, wondering where the problems could have come from. Something was wrong, he had missed some detail. Mary comes into the dining room and all the prisoners are eating there. Everything should have gone well. Then he sees Dolly and the magic ball. Is she really connected with this? And when the bullet was stolen? Someone is controlling the instigators, but it is necessary to find out who is behind them. He gave the order to the guard to watch. There were broken tables and mountains in the dining room. Batishes and lying in blood prisoners. Mary approached Dolly and asked, since she had not intervened but had simply watched, what she would do now. Run away with everyone or go beg for Aiden's forgiveness. The witch said that she remembered her as a little girl, watched her and told her teacher to watch her, since her intelligence was visible from childhood. But this intelligence turned the girl into an arrogant and selfish bitch. And this bitch will stop at nothing to achieve her own goals. Mary was clearly disappointed by such an unflattering statement, but replied that Dolly should watch her language. They were now in the same boat. Then she launched her power, which began to draw in the air magical signs, telling Mary who she needs to work with her. The Tiger Woman and the Gorgon noticed that the conversation was not going according to plan, but decided not to interfere, since they knew that Dolly cooperates with Aiden. She has a part saved forces. Mary was frightened by the sight of such power, saying that only she could break her contract. Dolly responded by laughing and saying that she had also descended into the Forbidden Lands and mastered all these techniques. Dolly I was looking for. Although she didn't find her former student in the Forbidden Lands, she did learn the techniques of splitting, the same as Mary. It allows one to split a creature's body, soul, and even lifespan in half. The witch added that her former student forgot to mention one detail of this technique. The creature's mind suffers, and they turn into mentally retarded, crippled clones. After that, she threw Mary away with all her strength. At that moment, the succubus grabbed her by the hand and dragged her along, telling her to run. Mary stood in a daze, seeing not a succubus, but a deity with a knife, who told her to close her eyes and that soon everything would end. In this succubus moment, she collapsed to the floor with her, seeing a rat that jumped onto her leg. The enraged prisoner rushed at the succubus with a furious cry, intending to tear her apart with her claws. She felt a burning pain and blood from the prisoner's claws spurted from her head. Mary tried to close it. The succubus screamed in pain. Everything turned into some kind of chaos. The enraged prisoner thought it was time to stop, but her whole being continued to demand blood. She didn't care anymore. She threw the succubus and Mary away with all her might with her paw. Mary looked at Danger. Somewhere she could hear the voice of her cellmate, who was trying to find her. At that moment, her gaze fell on Dolly, who was sitting calmly at the table, and who mockingly waved her hand at her. At this time, Frenda ran with the guards, ordering everyone to return to their cells. The Gorgon, seeing the guards, said that they needed to retreat, but her sisters were by agreement this clearly unhappy. They screamed, and the thirst to kill, to tear apart, burst forth with renewed vigor. They no longer wished to obey. They stood and looked at the guards led by Frenda, and were a little confused, since this time there were many more guards. At this time, Aiden was thinking about the situation. He urgently needed to find out who was controlling the bloodthirsty group. Frenda announced that the rebellion had been suppressed and that the wounded needed to be dealt with, and these guys, she nodded towards the rebels, will be left to their own devices. Aiden accepted a batch of potatoes for planting, praising the prisoners for their work and noticing whether they had any problems. Them problems. The group stood like school children at the blackboard, not knowing what to do, whether the boss knew what they wanted to do and what to answer. They assured them that everything was wonderful and were about to leave, but Lucille looked at the barrel, licking her lips, telling them that she would like to take a sip. Aiden sharply ordered them to stop. They went cold with horror, but the next action of the warden left them even more shocked. He gave them a barrel and allowed them to celebrate the start of a project that falls entirely on their shoulders. The girls or Stormy celebrated at the beginning of the project. Liesel overdid it with alcohol, but swore to Aiden that the project would be done in the best possible way. Gilala considered herself a member of the ruling team. Wine and the knowledge that she was the leader of the group gave her confidence in her abilities. A tipsy Mandy and the giantess were happy that everything had worked out so well and they hadn't run away. They realized that they needed to serve the overseer faithfully and everything would be fine. Aggressive group rebels, she called on them to join her, saying that there was no security, so what was the point of sitting in cells? Lucille, the giantess, Mendy and Jalala approached them, ready to beat their faces in if they caused a commotion while they were working. Aya suddenly realized that they had truly become Aiden's obedient little dogs. The rebels immediately lit up and replied that it had been a long time, want to get even with them. And then they showed up themselves. The girls rushed at provocateurs. Gilala, shouting that they would paint their ugly faces, rushed forward, feeling the strength of her friends behind her. A harpy with blazing eyes, claws ready, rushed into the attack. Tear apart. Aya shouted to Liesel that her weak spot was her shoulders. If you break her arm, she will be paralyzed. Suddenly, the dragonborn Camilla jumped out, hitting the harpy so hard that it flew to the other end of the room. The boar woman growled that she too had become Aiden's dog, to which Camilla replied that she had simply come for the money, so once she took it, everything could continue. Camilla herself preferred to remain neutral. The succubus prepared the bag of money for Camilla, and with a businesslike air told Mary, calling her a brat, that she was protecting her not only in words, but that she had many levers to remove those she didn't like. The queen ant, with her broken arm bandaged, thanked her. At this time, the boar flew at Lucille with all the force of its multi-ton weight. Mendy yelled at the bouncer to turn around. Lucille calmly told her not to worry and hit her attacker with all her strength. The boar flew away with a roar, but a toothy creature was flying from above towards Mendy. Mendy used her ability to inflate the fox's tail to the size huge the ball from which it flew out beam. Having blinded the enemy, Mendy jumped up with fox-like grace and hit the offender so hard that she almost lost her teeth. At this time, Lucille got excited and twisted the boar. I didn't understand. How come she wasn't crushed by her 3-ton weight? She still has the strength to attack. A fiery magical symbol appeared on the brute's back. Lightning of fire illuminated her, and she tore out the tusks with her bare hands. Women. The boar screamed in pain. Aya called out to her friend that as soon as she finished with the boar, who was already writhing in pain, she should help the others. The giantess fought with a prisoner who had the ability to absorb the physical strength of her opponent during combat. One of the friends shouted to the giantess that if she won quickly, she would give her breakfast. At one moment she was overcome with ecstasy, and her patterns into the muscles. The strength became simply enormous. She furiously crushed her opponent, who had underestimated the giantess, thinking her a walking stupid mountain. They defeated the rebels, and Jalala jumped for joy with cries of victory. At that moment, Aiden entered. The guards lined up in 2 columns, and he ordered everyone to be silent. Everyone fell silent. Blood stains from the battles were visible on the floor. The girls stood in tense silence. Aiden said menacingly that he didn't give them freedom so that they could set up a fight club here. It would have been better if they had tried to escape. He stated that from tomorrow all the concessions will be lifted and he will return. Former regime. The vampire thought angrily that their plan was being thwarted, since tomorrow they would not be able to freely leave their cells. Frenda added that free movement does not apply to those who bussy in the potato planting project. Mendy clapped her hands joyfully, and the boar, which was being tied up by the guards, growled that Aiden was simply a real villain. Aya became very scared when she realized that Aiden had deliberately created the situation by allowing the prisoners to be released and then locked them up again. The prisoners' spirits have been severely damaged, but Aiden has guards, a magic circle, and 200 prisoner henchmen. She realized that no matter what plans the rebels had, in this situation they were unrealistic. The succubus happily patted Mary on the shoulder, that they were now 2 difficult prisoners. Sari smiled sweetly, saying that it was good that the aggressive prisoners were locked up. And she thought to herself that there would be more food in the canteen. And what would the warden say when his faithful dogs began to obey her? Her plan was to subjugate Aiden's minions through insect larvae. Aiden and Frenda walked down the corridor. They understood that it was too early to relax, and the aggressive rebels would not have the sense to start a riot themselves. Someone was controlling them. Frenda reported to him that the guard in the dining room said that the new prisoner was constantly communicating with Dali. Aiden called Mary in for questioning. She innocently replied that she started talking in Dali because she was curious why she didn't wear a uniform like everyone else. During the interrogation with Dali, he asked why she did not stop the riot. She assured the chief that she herself barely escaped. Rebellious, there was too much. Frenda questioned her about the attack on the new girl. Dali, with an air of innocent simplicity, insisted that she had only used a drop of magic to intimidate the new girl and exert influence over her. Aiden checked the lists of new employees who had joined them. Former smugglers, robbers, swindlers. Frenda was horrified by the reality that, due to mass layoffs, new staff were hired indiscriminately. This means that many of them may collaborate with prisoners. Aiden thought it was quite possible that someone was taking advantage of the prison's labor shortage to cause a ruckus. He didn't trust Dali, knowing that she was a real pretender, and if it weren't for the contract spell that she feared, she would have shown herself long ago. The warden gave the order to send guards to watch the prisoners, 1 person per person, and for Veronica to use her sense of smell to find and destroy all the witch's creations. The next day, planting work began. Mir was outraged at that escort. He couldn't take his eyes off her. It was irritating. She replied that she had been following her in the dining room, and if it hadn't been for the spell cast, the new girl would have been hanging on the gallows. Mary, irritated, snapped that if Aiden understood for them, but everything will be over. She replied that if there was no progress in the coming days, then documents will be lying on Aiden's desk, to which Mary said that if she were delivered the necessary ingredients, she would have arranged everything long ago. Gilala actively commanded the working prisoners. Any conversation stopped. By herself, decided I was about to have a cup of tea when I heard a familiar voice asking me to sit down next to her. Surprised to see Evans outgoing from the shadows, she choked on her tea. Evans asked permission to read her books on the advice of Mr. Aiden, so that she could make friends, and since Gilala was a child, she would like to start with her. Gilala noted that the 170-year-old child, Evans, is still as calm and detachedly started reading Snow White aloud. Seeing a book with strange pictures, the elf was surprised, since she had never seen one like it in the library before. While crushing another mouse, Veronica looked at Evans with resentment and asked the main escort, "Why is it so unfair? What merits does she have for all these benefits?" The girl said that Evans was in a difficult situation and answered with a question about how Veronica felt in prison. Must it the killer or his weapon? Veronica quickly replied that of course he was a killer. What kind of one? Meaning hold the weapon. Then the guard pointed to the girl and said that she was the weapon of the killer sentenced to life imprisonment. It was created by this mad ant queen Mei Liushina, who is rumored to capture orphans and perform insane body modifications on them. She continued to tell how Evans was brought in. Doctor was horrified. All the girl's insides were torn apart. They were intertwined with various devices and various weapons. Instead of blood, a strange caustic substance flows through the girl. It melts the scalpel, making it impossible to cure her in these conditions. God only knows how much pain she went through before getting here. She is 13 years old. She should be under the care of a loving family. But now she looks more like a machine than a living person. Veronica looked at the girl with sympathy. Couldn't she be helped? The warden said that there was an Imperial Dragon hospital, but it was very expensive and the city wasn't ready to pay such bills. At this time, the superintendent was called out that a new batch of prisoners had arrived. More of the Queen Ant's children arrived. Their condition was even worse than Evans's. They were like walking zombies. The children looked ahead indifferently. Their face, neck, and body were covered shandu, with traces of terrible experiments. The prisoners working outside were called to lunch. Everyone pounced on the food except Mendy, who was busy putting on her makeup. Gilala stood in the sun, and Lucille said that her food was drink. They joked and laughed merrily at the elf feeding on the sun's rays. Aya remembered how she and Lucille, going to battle and dreaming of creating their own guild, found an abandoned village with children. They wanted to adopt abandoned children, give them a family and care. The plan was to teach children professions and teach them how to earn money. After the battle, the guild was broken. Only 2 of them remained. There was a knock on the door of the room in the upper-class interracial guest house, and the maid brought food. The girl who opened the door said that she was late and showed her the door. She returned to her friends and the card game, saying that the dish was unusual and the loser would eat it. Parasites controlled by the Ant Queen began their action in the body, subjugating consciousness. The girls who had eaten lunch began to moan in pain, which grew stronger with each passing minute. Everyone in the canteen became ill. The food was poisoned. Frenda ran to Aiden, screaming that the food was poisoned, and the order was given to send them to the medical room. "I urgently need be to the city and call a doctor. The prison doctor was lured away long ago." Liesel was very worried about her friend and did not depart from her. She had to be taken to the hospital. She held her friend's hand when she told Liesel, calling her boss, that she had to move on with her life. No matter what happened, people and things were just little things on the long road of life. Then the girl lost consciousness. Liesel, having lost control, began to scream, trying to bring her to her senses. Aiden calmed her down by saying that it was just food poisoning and there was no need to yell like that. The fact that Aya lost consciousness due to the effects of the hallucinogenic drug is evident from the state of her pupils. Aiden told everyone that they would wait for doctors from the city as long as the patient's vital signs were normal. Aiden and Frenda discussed who could have brought in such a dose of poison. The cook was ruled out. She had been working here for several years. Frenda realized that Aiden was hinting at a traitor among the guards, since there was no other way for the poison to penetrate the rose wall. The warden said that the problem was that whoever started this was preparing for serious steps. All the cells needed to be searched. He also ordered that Superintendent Mo, who studied the cases of prisoners and possessed photographic memory. The experimental girl spoke through her hand, as her mouth was sewn up. It was used by Mary as a communication device through which she spoke with Dolly, stating that last time she went too far and could not hack without the help of the main witch protective mechanisms will be problematic. Dolly stood silently, and Mary continued to broadcast her plan. With the help of Evans, she would launch an attack, and Dolly needed to kill Aiden. The witch smiled and noted that Mary's original goal was to kill Aiden, and how could she talk about something like that so easily? Mary hid behind a tree and decided to take action. Soon everyone would find out that she was behind the poisoning. Dolly told her that first I need to visit my old friends, and when the time comes they will meet. Mary handed it over to her teacher, elixir allowing you to melt the collar and fully restore your strength. She decided to take a couple of these elixirs. The girl opened her lives, in which the bottles were stored like in a refrigerator. Dolly advised the Ant Queen to stay away from her. If the main witch Lamaya saw her, she would immediately kill her. At this time, a search began in every cell, and some prisoners were extremely outraged. In the succubus's chamber, Veronica found a strange, vibrating pink crystal. Quartermaster whispered to her that it vibrates under the influence heat. The succubus was hysterical and begged for her baby to be given to her. Veronica honestly promised to show this thing to Aiden. If he doesn't pose a threat, then it will be returned to her. The succubus became even more hysterical, begging not to show it to the boss. Dolly went to the library to see Arsena, calling her a bookworm. She didn't appreciate the humor and suggested they get to the point. The witch asked Arsena to look at Aiden's soul, whether it was the same as before, and whether he was ready to release them from the contract. Arsena asked if she was in her right mind to ask such a thing. Dolly explained her request. Her furry pets have been getting caught in mousetraps that have been placed throughout the prison lately. It's important to understand whether this is some kind of warning from Aiden. Arsena said that the warden served in the Holy Inquisition. He was dipped in holy water during the ceremony, so the only way to penetrate the soul was through his eyes. Dolly noticed that whether his soul was in the warden's body or not, he could not walk quickly. The witch explained that 2 months ago, for some unknown reason, the warden began using a cane, and his right leg became less mobile, so even if she couldn't defeat him, she could escape. Arsena reminded him of the agreement. One spell from his lips and they were dead. The girl suggested asking the elf who could read emotions. When Dolly left, she said that it would soon be very noisy here, and put it in front of the necromancer elixir. She also promised her friend that she would provide a secluded spot if needed. Arsena sat silently and did not answer. Veronica innocently showed Aiden the vibrating succubus crystal and asked if it was dangerous, to which he looked down and said nothing. Quartermaster, I grabbed my stomach from laughter and spent express education having told. What is this item used for? Veronica was ready to sink into the ground from shame when she found out everything. She remembered that when she said goodbye to her fellow villagers, they said that she was at the perfect age for love and wished her to ensnare Aiden. Veronica blushed, realizing how inexperienced she was in love affairs. She definitely had no chance. Suddenly, Veronica screamed that she could smell it. Everyone looked at her with alarm. While studying at the Equestrian Academy, the teacher showed them a flower and told them to remember this smell of death. He showed a flower that grows from the bones of a corpse. It contains the power of the evil god of the Forbidden Land. It was he who became the culprit of the Troubles 100 years ago, when all races were on the verge of extinction. Veronica, realizing the horror of the situation, rushed to the infirmary to see the sick. She screamed why the prison smelled like a bone flower. This smell was coming from everywhere. Those who were poisoned were vomiting in the cafeteria. Aiden was horrified when Veronica reported to him that the smell was coming from the prisoner's vomit. He remembered Evans when she was in jail and unconscious. The doctor said that there is a bone flower in her blood, and only the Queen of the Ants can get it. At that moment, Gilala ran in screaming, saying that Evans had escaped. She called for her mother and just ran away. The elf couldn't stop her. Aiden shouted that the Queen Ant was here and everyone was to go to Alert Level 1. The townspeople stopped at the sound of the prison siren, and talk of a riot could be heard. The prison siren was only activated in the most extreme cases of danger. The entire prison and the surrounding area were covered by a dome of magical protection. The guards are alarmed. The first level of combat readiness indicates that they are trying to break through the magic circle. One of the Ant Queen's daughters poured a potion on the cell lock, which melted before our eyes. Before the guards could shoot her, Mary herself appeared and said that it was time to start the fun. She began to pour her poison on the cell locks. Prisoners broke out to freedom. Dozens of aggressive creatures, sweeping away everything and ready to kill, broke free. Aiden was approached by security guards shouting that the Ant Queen attacked, the prisoners were free, and the juvenile delinquent melted the lock. Quartermasters, they were horrified. Panic began. This is a conspiracy. Are these children also her creations? Aiden told them not to panic. Getting out of prison is not that easy. Everyone must do their tasks. The main quartermasters, Helly and Jenny, were given orders to go to the cells. They could shoot, but not attack. Frenda and her assistant were supposed to go to the lobby. We need to figure out the mechanism of the protective circle and adjust it. Isabella was tasked with being responsible for logistics and providing the center with the necessary power. Veronica was supposed to guard the center of the prison and ensure the safety of Frenda and Mo. According to the regulations, after the alarm signal, the Silver City Army must arrive within 15 minutes. But Aiden realized that help wait no need. Anthony has thought of everything. Then Aiden took a flare from the desk drawer and lit it. When she left after her last mission, the bounty hunter Carol left her behind. If trouble arises, she will know, and will immediately arrive with help. She heard the call fireworks. It's not the best time, she cursed while in the ladies' room. The danger is that she herself might take advantage of the chaos that is happening, Aiden thought, holding the notebook in his hands. Frenda checked with the warden. It really could be used as a weapon. She wouldn't have done so if she hadn't been sure what Anthony's trump card was. As they were leaving, Anthony gave Frenda the same notebook and winked at her to pay attention to the note before entering the center. The mouse at that moment was Dolly's eyes. Frenda gasped, wanting to clarify, but Aiden said to keep quiet. No one should know about this. The witch was haunted by the question of what note they were talking about, what trump card the warden was hiding. She needed to find out everything thoroughly before quarreling with him. When the succubus found out who her little sister in the cell was, she wrapped herself in a blanket and screamed at the top of her lungs for her not to kill her. Mary thanked her for being kind to her and stood up for, offered to go with her and guaranteed protection. The succubus tremblingly babbled that she only 1-year-old remained in prison. The Ant Queen thoughtfully noted that the succubus was one of the few who protected and looked after her, so if fate so wished, they would meet again. The succubus, still frightened, but no longer trembling in feverish fear, looked at Mary and their eyes met. When she saw Mary ripping locks and collars off prisoners, she wondered if Aiden could handle them. The test subject, Mary, connected her tentacles to the bodies of the prisoners. They noted that strength seemed to be restored, but it felt as if it was not completely restored. They directed their forces towards the gates, and when they realized that they were too strong, they decided to try to demolish the walls. The Queen Ant ordered them to move out of the way and began to attack the obstacles herself. She almost managed to break through the gate. Everyone was shouting with impatience. One of the main one's quartermasters. She showed the keys and said that every prison has rules. Prevention riots are considered a feat. And this rule also applies in Rosa. The sentence will be reduced. Liesel stated that she doesn't care about the term. She wants to smear those degenerates who poisoned Aya. The Queen Ant tried to break through the barrier of the gate. The prisoners rushed about impatiently. The gate opened slightly but did not yet give way completely. The Tiger Woman asked about the other prisoners who were still locked in their cells. Shouldn't they be released? Mary answered why they need this trash. But she protested because you can't throw away living people like some kind of trash. Then Mary gave them a potion and said that it could not only melt locks, but also heal wounds. They should drink it if they encountered something unexpected. At that moment, a deafening explosion thundered, and the gates were broken down. The prisoners broke free with screams. Frenda and some of the guards were in a special room watching escaped prisoners. Deputy Aiden ordered to stick to the master plan. Special sirens lit up the walls and combat robots began to line up. A pure-agent the size of the lion familiar who was with the wild growling approached to stop the rioters. Dozens of armed guards, a lion and combat robots rushed at the prisoners who had jumped out. The guards used freeze rays, paralyzing those who will be targeted. Veronica asked why the magic circle wasn't activated, since the prisoners could use magic, to which the girl was offered to join the fight. Lucille was stretching her muscles. She was ready to beat up those she didn't like. Her shackles were removed. Mendy tried to calm her down. When Lucille and the guards rushed into battle, she managed to ask about the prison guards, who was in charge of them, and they reassured her that there were people there. Carol arrived, noticing a pile of mousetraps and smiling. She quipped about the large number of rats, to which Aiden suggested getting down to business. The bounty hunter's proposal was to station her men outside the prison to prevent the prisoners from escaping. Silver City. Payment 1,000 gold. In addition, she can offer elite warriors to fight prisoners. They can also be used as prison guards at a price of 100 gold per person, which is how many he plans to hire. Aiden wrote out the check and said he was hiring everyone. Carol smiled contentedly and said that she had no doubt about him, but she knew that prison funding had been cut drastically. Aiden interrupted her and said it was none of her business, handed her the check and said there was a special assignment for her personally. The girl was excited about the opportunity to earn money. Having taken a breather from the first round of battle, Lucille was surprised why the escaped prisoners had no leader. She realized that she was surrounded. She used the art of fire. A huge pillar of fire burst out from her back. The enemies needed to capture her because she was strong and her strength was growing with every minute. From the depths of the earth, a volcano of the ancient power of the gods began to rise, which, by absorbing, erases the mind. The last thing Lucille thought was that it was good to be alone. Her body began to emit discharges of powerful energy. She began to lose control of her consciousness, but was glad that none of her people were nearby and she didn't have to worry about hurting anyone. Having seen flaring up, the prisoners were amazed by her power. Where did she get her magical power from? She was just a master of martial arts. The Ant Queen said that Lucille had personally destroyed 1,000 vampire knights, and they would not be able to cope with her. Lucille's sparkling power. The ancient magician approached the Queen of the Ants and said that she knew who she was. She smiled and nodded affirmatively, saying that of course she had heard about her heroic feat. Lightning split the sky, vampires rushed forward one after another, but none returned alive. But even with all this, she is no match for her daughter Aiden, whose powers have not yet been fully revealed. They heard a hissing sound and a huge snake burst out of the circle, grabbing Lysil. Dali controlled the snake form, and Lysil shouted that she was also one of the rebels. The brute found herself in a circle from which she could not escape. A huge magical force held her. Lysil screamed at the top of her lungs, activating the power of her powers. The witch Dali, looking at the astonished rebels, said that on Lysil's body there is a magical sign indicating her belonging to the descendant of an ancient god. The more she is wounded, the more her strength increases. Now she is captivated by the spell, so there is no need to be afraid and move on. At that moment she flew out of the circle of Gilal's spells, screaming that she does not see Aiden's emotions. One of the prisoners still behind bars called her a liar. The prisoners looked at him with apprehension. Screaming in the circle, Lysil began to move on. At that moment, the thug clearly saw the children from that abandoned village. They were so happy when they found out that they would all be taken away when we'll destroy vampires. Lysil said that she always keeps her word, and she will definitely come back for them. When they went with Aya to find out about the children, they were told that they had all been adopted by some woman. And now, seeing the exhausted zombie-like girl whom the Ant Queen called her daughter, I realized that this was the very girl who had been waiting for so long. Lysil screamed, so it was she who adopted these children and used them as an experiment, to which Mary only grinned. Prisoners in the central zone fought with combat robots' machines. There were guards at the door, and many of the rioters were torn to pieces by the lion familiar. One of the prisoners approached the Queen Ant with a request to do something. Dali began to cast a spell, summoning her falcon familiar. The huge bird rushed to smash the combat vehicles like toy soldiers. The lion also began to disappear. Dali explained that it was dispelling magic. It's not for nothing that she is the main witch, and her main focus is summoning creatures. The guards noted that if the witch had been on their side, they would have definitely managed to win. Behind their backs, Mendy timidly remarked what they should do now. Frenda, watching from a special room, ordered a retreat according to instructions, and hurried to find out why the prisoners could use magic. Quartermaster, the person responsible for setting up the magic circle, reported that the circle's readings were normal and that magic was being delivered to the prisoners from the outside. Their enemy is the Ant Queen. This is her job. She increased the strength of the rebels. It was decided to reboot the magic circle and bring energy stones. The prisoners, seeing that the guards had retreated, began to run towards the exit. Only the Princess of the Blood was feeling unwell, complaining of lack of sleep and headaches in the last few days. Dali asked Mary why she didn't take it off the other scholars, to which she replied that her potion alone was not enough. She injected stimulants into their brains to activate their magical powers. But if the stimulants are not removed, their brains will collapse under such stress. Dali smiled and noted that her former student was using the same methods. Meanwhile, the guards hid in the bunker and fired from holes in the walls. Mary replied that she knew what to do in this zone. There are 3 passages, and there are currently less than 100 security guards. She suggested using their numerical advantage to split into 3 groups to take out the guards and then have everyone meet at the main entrance. Dali agreed. But she noticed that she would not be able to help all 3 groups if something happened, since special mechanisms were installed here. Mary reassured her that her employer wanted Aiden alive, not the prisoners. Then she ordered Evans to clear the way, and the girl obediently began to act. The girl walked forward. Arrows, bullets, spears pierced her. She was burning. The prisoner standing next to Mary screamed that the girl was injured. Mary calmly ordered to just watch what happens next. The #1 killer is capable of much more. The girl covered in bullets simply absorbed them. The dress was torn, and 2 pieces of cloth came out from her shoulder blades. Revolver, which she took into her hands and, like an experienced machine, began to shoot. Having absorbed the bullets, Evans began to shoot them back at the guards. Mary looked at her creation with pride. The Ant Queen ordered to move forward. The guards began to retreat under the firepower. Someone approached. Lysil shouted that whoever it was should hit her so that she could break free from these shackles. The succubus slapped her. The thug asked her if she hadn't eaten enough porridge. Let him at least stab her with a knife. At this time, they heard someone rapidly approaching them. They were quickly attacked by one of the bloodthirsty rebels. Lysil and the succubus froze without saying anything. They simply waited for the next step. The townspeople stopped and looked at the sky, seeing the thunderclaps without understanding. What's wrong with the weather if there's thunder in Solar Day? Aiden met Arsena and asked why she wasn't in the library, to which she replied that, given what was happening, unlikely someone will come for the book. Aiden invited her to take refuge in his office, then looked at her and asked if she had come to challenge him. Arsena replied that she wouldn't dare. Arsena said that many people will die today, and Mr. Aiden himself might die. Wouldn't he like to leave her soul for safekeeping? The tiger woman and her partner went down to the punishment cell calling for Katrina, Anna, and Ella, who were locked somewhere here. Suddenly, they heard a cry for help from below. Someone was locked in the room below the punishment cell. They climbed out after the hatch was opened for them, saying that the monsters in the lower compartments were constantly fighting, and their heads were already spinning. The harpy said that she lost contact with the main group while rescuing and how they were all supposed to get out of here now. One of them suggested releasing a Wendigo, a creature locked in a cage, to clear the way for them. Everyone stood in silence. It was unknown how this creature would behave. Kat noted that wasn't there a reason the Wendigo was locked up here. The pirate added that there were rumors that evil deities were sitting in this creature. The third one said, "What if it killed them too?" "Don't worry," the initiator of the proposal replied. "We have a good relationship with this creature. They will soon see how it defeats the prison guards." Quartermasters watching these steps, we sadly noted that they themselves are renting out his accomplices. One of the prisoners saw the girls and was a little scared, but the tigress said that there were only 2 of them, and she would deal with them. The tigress had an animal instinct for impending danger and bared her teeth predatorily. Having started to attack the guards, she saw rays emanating from them. Her ardor cooled down and she offered to surrender. Fear and danger paralyzed the instinct of a predator to attack. The boar rushed at the girls at full speed, and they turned the attacker into mincemeat with their weapons. Blood spread across the walls. Everyone was shocked by the outcome of the matter. Tigress said we need to save our asses. Some of them already were not sure that the Wendigo will be able to defeat the guards. How one of the prisoners showed a whole bag of Ant Queen potion and suggested feeding it to the Wendigo. After arguing a bit about how much to feed this creature to have an effect, we decided to give it everything we had. The creature began to grow in size incredibly quickly. The prisoners watched in fear as the monster began its transformation. An incredible roar and explosion began. The Wendigo changed shape and turned into a monster that moved chaotically towards the group. Liesl remembers her battle. Pictures flashed through her head in fragments. She stands on the field, surrounded by dead opponents, and she managed to defeat them all. Her comrade shouts that more enemies are coming. There are a huge number of them, and there will be no reinforcements. They were abandoned. They were just bait. The Queen of Bloodsuckers and her army rushed to attack her alone. There was a fierce battle, so many bodies. She and the Queen opposite each other. An army behind the Queen. This gave Liesl anger and rage. She glowed with magical seals, and the succubus flew to the side from the explosion. The descendant of the ancient god screamed. The chains of the circle in which she was imprisoned began to break. The succubus flew back and landed painfully on the hard floor. But what she saw after, a monster of immense size with a multi-ton mass, was moving towards them. Liesl screamed for Idid. The succubus rolled her eyes, not understanding where she was or what was going on. She was caught by Camilla's strong arms, who told her that she had to leave. It was very dangerous here. She pulled the succubus, who was screaming that her shorts were caught, to which she replied, "It's good that at least they are there." The succubus became hysterical and screamed for Camilla to help Aiden. Camilla exhaled and tried. I tried to calm her down by saying that I just saw a nightmare, but she insisted on her own. Sobbing, she told of a vision where Aiden lay defeated by the prisoners and died. And all 80 prisoners decided to rape him. "This is an atrocity," Camilla said. Does she want to say that she herself was not among the prisoners? To which the succubus replied that if she had been, then it would not have been an atrocity. Camilla pointed out that they themselves now need help. When the descendant of the ancient god goes crazy, he does not distinguish between friends and enemies. Liesl had already turned into a deity. Having lost her human face, she called on the transformed Wendigo to attack. Waves of fire flew by. Those prisoners who were still in their cells asked for help. Their things caught fire. Those who were able to move fled. Camilla carried the succubus under her arm. During this time, Evans fought against combat robots while being a machine herself. The fugitives, having said that everything was going like clockwork here, jumped out to freedom, running past obstacles. Mary asked Dolly. She always wondered why witches couldn't modify others. Looking at Evans, she added that it was possible to create an entire army like her and take over the continent. Dolly replied that other witches were no stupider than her. She wanted to add something else, but changed her mind. Then she seriously told Mary that since she had chosen this path, she should not consider herself part of the Sabbath, and forbade her name and the name of the teacher to be mentioned. Mary replied that those who do not know how to adapt will sooner or later be eliminated. If she had not known about the power of their teacher, she would not have stood on ceremony with her. The guards, along with Mendy, ran into the room, checking that everything was in place and that there were no wounded. Veronica asked Mendy, dumbfounded, why she was here. Had the rebels really made their way into this part? Mendy, out of breath, replied that Evans and Dolly had joined the rebels and they could not be defeated. The girls asked what to do next, and one of the guards said that they needed to join a support group since the entrance to the prison cells had been lost. Veronica asked about the army, why they hadn't arrived yet. At this time, the army was sitting in a restaurant. Anthony was feeding and watering them, paying for everyone. One of the soldiers said it was wrong for them to be here for so long, but Anthony assured them that Lord Aiden could handle everything himself. It's just a show with all the sirens to suppress a non-existent riot and teach the prisoners a lesson about why they should ruin the warden's plan. Then Anthony saw that a cart with energy stones ordered from Rose Prison was leaving. He tried to dissuade me from going because there was a riot in the prison right now. But the delivery man said that order, it is absolutely necessary to take it away. This is the third phase. Anthony was shocked. He didn't know anything about it. Prison funding had been cut. Where did the warden get the money from? Carol heard all this in tension, pretending to be an ordinary visitor. Aiden sat there all the time. Also with Arsena, she, seeing that the gate had been broken through, asked why he wasn't doing anything. The warden said thoughtfully that a riot is not a simple thing. It is necessary to check whether the exercises were effective. But inside he was panicking. The gates had been breached. Everything was going faster than they had expected. If they couldn't stop the rebels in the center, there would be a failure. But he continued to pretend to be carefree. He was under guard now, and if he showed any signs of agitation, they would expose him. All that remains is hope. That there would be no more mistakes, he thought. Dolly listened as the prisoners bragged about how they broke into the center. Aiden was stupid and couldn't do anything. Dolly tried to figure out what was behind Aiden's confidence. If he still had the same power, then Unlikely would stand aside. At this time, the mouse showed the traps that had been set up, and Dolly thought that this was definitely meant for her. Rats made their way to the prison in hordes, and the guards screamed in horror, asking where so many of them were coming from. The gates were broken down. There was no guard. The guards were asking who could give orders. They needed a plan of action. Mendy offered herself. She stated that she had previously commanded an army and began giving orders. Under Mendy's command, fire began, and some of the prisoners rushing forward were thrown back. Gorgon said that the concentration in the security center is 90%, but she does not smell Aiden. The Ant Queen smiled at how helpless Aiden was now. She added that it was time for her ants to hunt and activated the patients in the infirmary, whom she controlled through insects. The sick began to rise and, like zombies, follow the call of the mistress. Nowadays, no one would consider a dying patient a threat. Together, Aya, who no longer belonged to herself, stood up with everyone else. Mary said with a smile that the infirmary was their biggest mistake. They didn't take it into account at all. Veronica smelled the cadaverous odor and immediately realized that something was happening in the infirmary. The zombies controlled by Mary almost broke down the door. Veronica screamed that they were approaching. Escorts didn't understand who she meant. When they were alone with Frenda, she gave the girl a special mission. If the unexpected happens, Veronica needs to come to Aiden's aid. Frenda shared with her that 2 months ago he lost his memory and turned into an ordinary person. Frenda also added that this was kept secret because few people can be trusted in prison. Frenda also wasn't entirely sure about boarding schools, whether they will be able to perform their duties during the chaos. She reminded Veronica of the original reason she was sent to prison. Veronica remembered the day when Aiden saved her from her enemy. He stood and looked into the distance. Veronica then walked in his cloak and cried. She was so grateful to this man. The girl jumped up and ran with all her strength. She realized that the door to the infirmary was next to Aiden's office. Frenda saw this through the controls in the bunker and ordered the side door to be opened, and Veronica allowed into the infirmary. The door was broken down. The patients were about to escape from the infirmary. Veronica, turning into a werewolf, rushed at the crowd that had broken free. Zombie rushed a crowd of people ready to tear her apart. They were no longer human. Veronica pinned down the first one who rushed at her, realizing that only she could hold them back now. Mary's controlled puppets were also unusually strong, one of them hitting Veronica with all its might. The guard shouted to Mendy that this was certain death. Mendy justified herself by saying that she was in command in the fight against bandits, and not against prisoners. Mendy actually watched the men who commanded the squad. Her main task was flirting and seduction. The guard yelled at her that prisoners and bandits were not the same thing, shaking her and demanding that she do something before it was too late. And then it dawned on Mendy that she could use her charms and see how they would affect women. The guards started to run away. The prisoners shouted after them, what good were they if they ran away like rats? Mary ordered to immediately destroy the opponents before they could collect their thoughts. Mendy, having transformed, used the fox spell, causing passion and charm. A huge flow of fluids enveloped the room, and everyone found themselves in a fog. When the prisoners realized that the fog was not poisonous, they thought it was just a trick. But after just a minute, the women began to vomit. The unbearable smell made them sick. Mendy said that these are her abilities and her kind. She releases pheromones in huge quantities, making puppets out of men with the help of sexual desire. Well, for those who are not interested in women, the smell is simply unbearable, but her strength will not be enough. There are too many opponents. The guards noticed that no wonder there is no one here who might like women. But some women did not feel sick. It began to dawn on everyone that they were attracted to their own sex. The Gorgon was lit up with a loving fire. Everyone gasped, shouting that she liked women. Mendy was delighted. Now she could use this puppet for her own purposes. The Gorgon tried to resist the scent, but it became more and more saturated. And now she is already whirling in a dance with Mendy, who announces that this is their wedding dance. The Gorgon blushed with embarrassment. She's not understood whether it was a dream or reality, but it was so enveloping, this aroma of love. Then she spat on everything, even if it was a dream, but it was so beautiful she looked at her beloved with all her might. Mendy wrapped herself more and more around her puppet, creating a further illusion. She controlled her subject and she released her power on former comrades. The explosion killed the former comrades, and the guards stared at this picture in surprise. Dali and Mary looking. They couldn't understand what was happening when they looked at the incomprehensible picture. Mary said that there was no need to waste energy on her. She would activate the insects that were in the Gorgon, and Dali should kill Aiden. At this time, Carol was running with a succubus under her arm, and 13th, unknown creature to whom they gave the name 13, lit up with magical symbols. Mary was blinded. The creature grabbed Mary tightly with its tentacles, and she felt like she was drowning. The horror of childhood, chaos, fear. The depths of the cursed land came to mind. They sat her down trembling with fear and asked her to stay and wait. The creature said that it had brought her here from the depths of the forbidden lands, and that her strength was running out. It promised to return tomorrow. Magical barrier will protect the baby. She found herself in some kind of cave, trembling with fear and horror and screaming at her savior not to abandon her. She is small. She burst into tears when she heard those terrible creatures from the forbidden land calling her little pig. In front of her was a hand full of ants and a voice saying that she was hungry. I need to eat. Mary still with the rope dangling. She ran away on her neck. She can't go back there again. She made her way through the thorns, tearing her legs until they bled. But she couldn't stay here. She fell on sharp thorns similar to Tojian teeth. This horror came back to life in her again. Then she sees in front of her a woman with a covered face, only her huge beautiful eyes. The stranger asked her if she was ready to see the world outside the forbidden zone. Dali spoke with the stranger, saying that this child had come such a long way. She found her on a mountain road. The witch wanted to take her as her apprentice, but the stranger said that with this child's skills she was very far from magic. Besides, they did not know her. At that moment, Mary on the floor stretched out her bloody hand and called for her mother. The stranger said that even after hitting her head in this state, she continues to call for her mother. Mary stammered that no, her mother had taught her that when they were kept in a barn with pigs. The girl said that if she had a chance to leave the forbidden zone, she said to call any man she met daddy and any woman mommy. That was the only way to survive. It was so painful for the stranger to hear the word mother. She stood with flowers, and her heart was breaking with grief. In front of her lay a coffin with the one she loved so much, her dear daughter. On the table with flowers stood a photograph of a little smiling girl. The woman changed little Mary's clothes and bandaged her wounds, noting that being her student was very difficult. Then she remembered how her mentor scolded her for conducting genetic experiments on a living person. How angry she got, saying that she should do it on herself if she was so brave. The girl sobbed and admitted that she was afraid of pain. The woman grabbed her by the collar of her dress. She shamed her adopted daughter for doing such things at her age on living people. Mary sobbed and asked to forgive her. She just wanted to win the competition. She remembered how the mentor ordered her to take care of the body of the man Mary had killed, and to do everything possible to prevent rumors from leaking out about this incident. Next came the award ceremony for the best student, and the teacher warmly embraced the girl who won the competition. The other students were happy, but Mary looked and wished that she were in that girl's place, so that her adoptive mother would be proud of her. Wooden arms wrapped around her, the girl asked to be hugged. How she missed affection and warmth. Hugging the wooden doll and sobbing, Mary asked not to look down on her. She knows that she is just a replacement for her own daughter. She wants to be the best for her. Holding the wooden body tighter, she talked to it, saying that she was an ordinary person. Magic was beyond her power, and only body modification remained. Snuggling up to the doll to cry and talk things out, the girl said she wanted to modify her doll so her mother wouldn't know anything. And then, already grown up, she flies into the depths of the forbidden lands, driven away by her adoptive mother. Mary screamed at her mother, asking herself why her mother cared more about others than about her. She understood that only her mentor saved her from the abyss into which she was falling. And so Mary flies back to where she once ran from. A huge stake pierces her body, and a familiar voice calls her the little pig who has returned. She saw that very creature, a living dead man similar to a mummy, that nightmare from childhood. She was abandoned again. She was discarded. Now she had nothing to lose. She was still sitting near the wall. Evans managed to intercept the spear flying at her adoptive mother, asking what her mother was thinking about. Mary wiped away her tears and said that she had simply fallen into an illusion. But looking at Evans, her daughter and best creation, all illusions were dispelled. Dali told her to stop treating herself like that. If it weren't for her technology, they would never have been able to get out of here, and the whole prison would be covered in snot. And she went forward, dragging the tied-up Galala behind her. One of the mercenaries, pouring liquid on her sword, ordered her squad not to kill the prisoners if they wanted to get money. The attack with crossbows began. The Gorgon fought in the front ranks with the squad. Behind the Gorgon, Camilla and the succubus, who was still running in her underwear, broke through the enemy. Suddenly, a bright emerald light appeared from the Gorgon. Her magical power was at its peak. Dali paused. Mary was next to her. Evans was in front. Galala was lying tied up on the floor. The witch cast a transformation spell and launched a strike against the Gorgon's magic. The succubus screamed for her to get out of the way. They were running from the monster and not fighting. Dali used transformation and said that she couldn't let them ruin everything. The passage opened and she walked forward, dragging the tied-up elf. Before her appeared the incredibly powerful energy of the descendant of the ancient god Baal. Camilla, the succubus, and the others screamed in horror when they saw what was approaching them. The witch, having changed part of her appearance, called upon the power of the gods, opening the Ahot abyss. She fired a beam at Lysil, who had turned into a god of destruction, who was running towards her. She stopped, breaking down the barrier in which Dali wanted to lock her. Once in the labyrinth, she heard the voice of the god of the labyrinth, Ikot, with whom she had to play a game if she wanted to get out. Dali had to use this technique to stop her from killing everyone, but the witch's strength was also depleted. She didn't know where to get additional energy. From the descendant of the ancient god came an even stronger clot of energy, destroying everything. With each spell, its power only increased. The guard shouted that there was a message from the chief. The blockers were removed. The prisoners were working at 100%. At this time, the Gorgon controlled by Mendy was in the created illusion of the first wedding night. Mendy giggled and asked to get out from under the blanket. The Gorgon blushed and asked not to rush. The fox said she was a professional acupuncture massage therapist and would quickly relax her. The Gorgon began to regain her strength, and it seemed that she was about to explode. With one blast wave, she took out dozens of prisoners advancing on her. The vampire said that she was entering the battle and prepared to attack. The Gorgon and the vampire began to fight. Just as she was about to bite into her former ally, Carol's mercenaries arrived, telling her not to kill her, otherwise they wouldn't pay. At that moment, the quartermaster burst in and shouted that even though they were mercenaries, that did not give them the right to ignore her orders. Then she saw the senior guard, who calmed her down by saying that the circle had been won from the very beginning. It simply served as a deterrent. She screamed in horror and surprise, but the girl explained that it simply costs a lot of money. Dali asked Mary how she was going to break through. There were a lot of guards. She suggested using Evans, but the witch said that the girl was needed to kill Aiden, and she could not waste the rest of her strength. Suddenly, a Death Reaper appeared in front of them from the magic circle. Mary asked who he was, and Dali realized that Arsena had finally begun to act. The Death Reaper said that at first she didn't believe that she could gather many souls here, but at the moment many people had died, and she clarified whether they would continue the battle. Dali replied that she had used up most of her power, and that it was dangerous to challenge Aiden in such a state. The Reaper replied that she didn't care, but that when they reached Aiden's office, she would help them. Mary wondered if the prisoners had made it to Aiden's office, and Dali, speaking through the Reaper with Arsena, said that her help would not hurt. As she began to release her tentacles from her hand, the Ant Queen thought that even if he was at least injured, it would be good. But she saw a different picture. Veronica destroyed all the zombies created by Mary. Mistress Austen, the Beastman Queen of the rest home, pulled insects out of her body, cursing that the food was poisoned. They were just playing cards with their friends and discussing what would happen if they ate every last crumb. The girl, tightening her corset, wondered if she was really so naive that she wanted to control her with the help of parasites. Before her sat a werewolf, whom she commanded to return or die. She thought it was a rare thing to see in a prison run by Aiden. Seeing Veronica sitting there after killing so many crazed prisoners, I thought she was too focused on her animal instincts and would need time to come to her senses. The girl appeared in front of Veronica, surprised that she had retained her sanity. Usually werewolves lose their minds after so many murders. Opening the passage portal, Dali asked Mary where her daughters were. They needed to conserve their strength to kill Aiden. The Ant Queen pointed to the girls' corpses, saying that there was no one to call, and they were already dead. She used them as reservoirs for the potion. Mary, followed by Evans and Dali, went to pass through the passage. The vampire screamed where they were going. Leaving everyone behind, she was turned into a bat. The prisoners were alarmed, wondering what to do. Their warden was abandoning them to their fate. They saw the advancing mercenaries, realizing that their strength was too small to overcome them. The screaming woman was hit by her friend, who shouted that she had woken up. They had been abandoned, and no one would come back for them. For this, the prisoner killed her comrade. The other growled why she killed her so cold-bloodedly for such a trifle. She objected. She couldn't. Her strength wouldn't be enough for that. The collar prevents the release of strength. Arguments began. They didn't believe her. Everyone lost their friends and was angry. Meanwhile, Frenda coordinated the actions of the prisoners, giving orders as to which prisoner should attack which. They were looking at the imprisoned Kikimora. Her danger level was Class C. A Class B imprisoned mummy named Jibil. Based on the analysis, the girls decided to reduce the suppression of the collar so that in a fit of rage, the prisoners would destroy each other. They lowered the restraint on the mummy's collar, and it moved towards the others. Another second and a beam came from her that hit the person standing next to her. She saw it fly away and realized that something was wrong with the collar. The partner asked Frenda why she hadn't used this technique earlier, and she replied that the stones for powering the collars had only just arrived. She remembered Aiden's recording, saying that it would be impossible to suppress such a riot without bloodshed. Aiden gave Frenda a list of thorns that needed to be eliminated, as if by accident. They were bloodthirsty. Rehabilitation would be impossible. Dali was also on the list. Since she had sided with the rebels, she needed to be killed too. Dali wondered if Aiden had ever used a lethal weapon. The guards just had stun bullets.